Polepole mwendo.
They were waiting for the leader to come. I'm here.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness have appointed the office of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor as your servants whom you've been pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country, and of those whose interests are committed to our church. Amen.
Yes.
Now, we may need to look to check in the other stations in order to determine whether there is quorum. I think we can start with the preliminaries.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
Member for Mathare.
Pursuant to Standing Order 44.2C, I seek to request a statement from the Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security on extrajudicial killings in Mathare constituency. Honorable Speaker, on Monday, the 1st of June 2020, a resident of Mathare constituency by the name of James Mithi Njeru alias Vaite was shot and killed by police at about 7:05 in Area 3C, Mabatini Ward in Mathare constituency. The deceased was a homeless man who is reported to be seeking shelter at night, alternately between vibandas and sheds erected outside buildings within Mathare. Further, James Murithi Njeru also lost his life under unclear circumstances through a bullet. Honorable Speaker, on or about 25th of March 2020, an innocent 13-year-old by the name of Yasin Moyo, a KCPE candidate, had his life cut short by a bullet that got him while in the balcony of in the presence of his parents in their house in Kiamichael area in Mathare constituency. Honorable Speaker, a resident of Mathare by the name of Michael Njao alias Gorba disappeared while on his way from Thika Town in the company of 3 other persons. This was more than a month ago, and despite being searched by his family and residents from Mathare, where he hails, his whereabouts cannot be established nor his body. Honorable Speaker, it is against this background that I seek a statement from the Chairperson on Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security to address the following. 1, the circumstances that led to the death of a resident of Mathare constituency, namely James Mithi Njeru alias Vaite, who was shot and killed by police in Area 3C, Mabatini Ward on Monday, 1st of June 2020. 2, what steps have been taken to ensure speedy arrest and prosecution of the police officer responsible for loss of life of the mentioned deceased person? 3, the whereabouts of a resident of Mathare constituency by the name of Michael Njao alias Gorba, who disappeared while on his way from Thika Town in the company of 3 other persons more than 1 month ago, despite this having been reported to the police. 4, the circumstances that led to the death of an innocent 13-year-old named Yasin Moyo from Kiamaiko Ward on the 25th of March 2020, and what steps have been taken to ensure speedy arrest and prosecution of those responsible of the life. And lastly, the ongoing extrajudicial killings in the country, especially during the enforcement of curfew and other measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Chairman, Administration National Security, when do you... I've seen the Honorable Koinange make his way in.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker. Had actually spoken to the Honorable Member, and it will take 2 weeks so we can be able to reply to the statement.
Honorable Watch, 2 weeks, eh? Very well. Member for Kilifi North.
Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order number 44-2C, I seek a statement from the Chairperson, Committee on Implementation, regarding the progress of construction of the Ronald Ngala Utalii College in Kilifi County in view of the status of implementation of the Public Investment Committee's special report on the college dated May 2017. Honorable Speaker, the committee considered a special audit report that questioned the circumstances that led to the escalation of the project from its original cost of Kenya shillings 1.9 billion to Kenya shillings 8.9 billion before it was scaled down to Kenya shillings 4.9 billion. The National Assembly's peak recommended that the project be implemented as per the CDTLT board resolution of 13th December 2010 to redesign the college to accommodate 3,000 students at a cost of 8.9 billion. Honorable Speaker, the government approved the construction of the coast branch of the Kenya Utalii College via Cabinet Minute 30/1996, dated 1st February 1996. Further, the Cabinet revisited the matter in 2007 via a letter reference OP CAB 584A, dated 13th September 2007, proposing the expansion of the project at an estimated cost of Kenya shillings 1.948 billion. The project has since spent up to Kenya shillings 2 billion, and the work is not complete despite assurance by the Cabinet Secretary that it will be completed by 2019. Honorable Speaker, PIC recommended to the then Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Tourism, to, as a matter of urgency, pursue a post facto Cabinet approval for the downscaled project and seek Cabinet approval for the implementation of the hotel component of the project through the Public-Private Partnership PPP framework, and report to the National Assembly on the implementation status of this recommendation not later than 6 months after the adoption of the report. The committee also recommended that the project be implemented not later than 19th June 2019 as per the signed contract and subsequent addendums issued on 14th May 2013 and 25th August 2014, respectively. Further, the Chief Executive Officer of the college was also to report to the National Assembly on the implementation status not less than 12 months after the adoption of the report. Honorable Speaker, it's now very many months after this report was placed before the House. Honorable Speaker, it is against this background that I seek your direction for the Committee on Implementation to investigate and intervene with a view to addressing the following issues. 1, what is the status of the project with a view to ensure its speedy completion? 2, was there prudent use of public funds allocated, and establish how much money the project has used so far? how much has been budgeted for, and what percentage of the project has been completed? And finally, did the Cabinet Secretary seek approval from Cabinet for the project to be redesigned as directed by Parliament? I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
I don't see the chair of Committee on Implementation. Maybe the leader of the minority party, the Honorable John Bandi, should take up that matter. Refer it to the Honorable Olekenta. That statement is sought from the chair of Committee on Implementation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll pass the message to the chair, Lekenta, and I really, I don't think it's some work which should take long. Maybe, let me see if I can pass a message that he does it in 2 weeks then.
2 weeks.
Yeah. Very well.
Much obliged.
Next request by the member for Ugenya. Member for Ugenya.
No, I don't have corona.
Proceed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to request a statement regarding disobedience, failure to comply with and non-execution of court orders by the executive, the national government, and its agencies. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order number 44-2C, I wish to request for a statement from the chairperson of the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs regarding cases of disobedience of court orders, failure to comply with court orders, and non-execution of court orders by the executive arm of government and its agencies. Honorable Speaker, the government of Kenya is established by law under the Constitution of Kenya, wherein Article 1.3 creates the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary as the organs of the state to which the sovereign power of the people is delegated. The state organs, Mr. Speaker, are distinct and are bound by the doctrine of separation of powers and functional independence of each. Mr. Speaker, the proper functioning of government depends on the cooperation and execution of each of the state organs' roles and functions as declared in the Constitution, and failure of any one organ to carry out its functions affects the functioning of the other two. Therefore, Speaker, for some time now, there has been hue and cry from the judiciary, an independent state organ, that the national executive, another state organ, is willfully disobeying court orders, is failing to comply with court orders, and is failing to execute court orders. There has also been hue and cry, Mr. Speaker, from citizens that the national government is not obeying court orders and is frustrating the execution of court orders. Some of the cases, Mr. Speaker, that come to mind and which have been cited include the eviction of the Sengwer from the forests in Environmental Petition number 15 of 2013. Mr. Speaker, the Miguna Dipekol, the Miguna case is still very fresh in our mind, Mr. Speaker. The summary of cases in Fred Matiang'i, CS, Minister of Interior versus Miguna. Mr. Speaker, the shutting down of TV stations. Mr. Speaker, the Teacher Service Commission and Director of Pensions, where I have more than 22,000 teachers who have been paid for more than 10 years now, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the latest are petitions 369 and 427 of 2019 regarding His Excellency the President's delay or indeed refusal to swear in judges recommended for appointment by the Judicial Service Commission, among others. Mr. Speaker, it's against this background that I wish to request the chairperson of the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs to inquire into and provide a statement to the House on the following. One, the instances, if any, of cases of disobedience of court orders, failure to comply with court orders, and non-execution of court orders by the national executive, its agencies, and institutions. 2, the effect of cases of disobedience of court orders, failure to comply with court orders, and non-execution of court orders by the executive, its agencies, and institutions on the administration of justice, the rule of law, and the respect for human rights. 3, the measures put in place by the national executive, its agencies and institutions to ensure that court orders are obeyed, complied with, and executed in a timely manner. Number 4, recommendations on action or actions to be taken on the state officers and officials of the national executive who willfully disobey court orders, fail to comply with court orders, or refuse to execute court orders. Finally, Mr. Speaker, what is the committee doing to ensure that such cases of disobedience and failure to comply with court orders are checked? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Do I see the Chair of Justice and Legal Affairs here? That request should go through the leader majority.
Speaker, I'll pass to the chair, and he will tell me how long he will take, and then I'll report back to the House next week.
No, that's... is there intervention? Honorable John Bandi wanted to...
Mr. Speaker, Honorable Ochieng has raised a very important and substantive agenda, something that I think has been at the core of discussion in this country, more particularly looking at the statement by the President of the Judiciary yesterday. And I think this is a matter that we need to take seriously as a country and deal with it. And I support that the committee needs to look at the matter exhaustively and report to the House. But I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, with some sections of the request, more particularly about disobedience of court order, etc. The question is, you know, we are 3 arms of government. And I was wondering then if that report of disobedience of the court order is brought here, are we setting a stage for some impeachments or what? Or what will we do with that report? Because really, if there are people in the executive, it would have been easier for us. If there are people in the executive who are disobeying court order, the same courts have the powers to convict them to civil jail. That is what we should have been dealing with, these cases where the courts or the judiciary has actually been defeated. But the judiciary has a lot of powers to deal with this matter, and they don't want to use them. The judiciary does not want to use those powers and appear like they're helpless, praying to Kenyans. I don't know what they expect Kenyans to do. And that, to me, is not very helpful. So I agree with some sections of that statement where we need to understand really what is the problem between the executive and judiciary. And if this house is a house of people's representatives, we can arbitrate because we have a duty to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law. So we'll see where the problem is. We need even to have the committee to invite the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya to explain some of these facts. But I think, Mr. Speaker, that the judiciary should also exhaust some of the powers that they have. And they have a very powerful, there are powers that are more powerful than what even this House would have, of committing these people who are disobeying, who are disobedient to court order, to civil jail. Mr. Speaker, that was my concern, because there are a number of, part of that statement was to find out, and then going ahead to find out those who are disobeying the court order. So my issue was around the disobedience of court orders. Thank you, Mr.
Or what became of the doctrine of contempt of court? Why are people not exercising that? But I think, well, since part of the question is what the committee is doing, and I was wondering what can the committee do? Yes. But anyway, let me not anticipate the response. The committee will come and report to the House what it is doing. The Honorable Junet, you also want to weigh into this one?
Chair, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to add to what you have just said. I know you are a former judicial officer. Speaker, I think what the judiciary is complaining about, some of them might be genuine, that we need to listen to as a House. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering what the committee will achieve, as you just said. That's what I wanted to say, because they have powers on their own that if somebody, the biggest tool judiciary has is a court order. Once they issue that order and you disobey it, they have other legal means again to address the same matter, Mr. Speaker. Or they can convict someone who disobeys their order. They can fine you. They have other legal ways of handling it. Mr. Speaker, when you just now, cry and say, I have no powers, Mr. Speaker, it creates more problems to the citizenry than the problem that exists. Because the citizen who was to run to the courts for help, and the courts are the ones crying. Now the citizen doesn't know where to go, Mr. Speaker. He's wondering, how do I take my problems to where there is a problem already, Mr. Speaker? So, Mr. Speaker, and the churches are closed now. If they were to go to churches, the mosques are closed. Citizens now don't know where to go, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the issue here is, first, people should not assume that the only government that is there is the executive. There are three arms of government. Even Parliament is part of government, Mr. Speaker. You are head of an arm of government as the chairman of the Parliamentary Service Commission, and the Chief Justice is the president of another arm. First, it is one arm of government addressing another arm. And every arm has their constitutional obligations and their constitutional functions to do and responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, I want to beseech this House that we look into this matter as a House if we can, because the committee will report to us. But when I look at it from where I'm seated now, before even I appear before the committee as an interested party, Mr. Speaker, the hands of this House is tied. This is a matter that the Chief Justice should exercise his authority on his own, at his level. Otherwise, if he says that, it will just be like another person who's crying in the street, Mr. Speaker. The biggest order that I lost in this world was the order that said open the server. That order was not implemented. Up to today, I'm crying also, Mr. Speaker, the way you're seeing me. Open the server. You remember that order, Mr. Speaker? That was the biggest order that was defied, if you ask me. These other orders are small things, Mr. Speaker. That is the biggest order I wanted to be implemented. Once that one I lost, other orders are small to me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I think there's a mechanism for enforcement, and I think that mechanism for enforcement is what needs to be examined. I thought there's no business, there's really not much business on this. Leader majority.
Mr. Honorable Junet has now an opportunity to appear before the committee with his court order, and who has refused to implement it. Then the House can discuss it. In fact, he should not be crying. I think 3 years down the line, an opportunity has come that the same Chief Justice who nullified an election, who some of us felt was wrong, is now saying he has no powers. So I think Honorable Junet and anybody else around here, and our voters who have a court order, because the one of Honorable Junet is a serious one. Now please look for the Committee of Justice and Legal Affairs. Make sure you have the court order and your lawyers, and be the first person to say that my court order on the opening of the servers have not been complied with.
Very well. That request is submitted to the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs to comb through and see what are all those issues, including those who may have their representatives who may be suffering like the Chief Justice. Because the member for Mwaya, the Honorable Omboko Milemba. The Honorable Omboko Milemba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. I also lost the 50-60 order sometimes back during the teacher strike, but that's not the business today. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, request for a statement regarding the payment of teachers across the country recruited by schools, boards of management, BOM. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 44.2c, I wish to request for a statement from the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Education and Research regarding payment of teachers across the country recruited by schools, boards of management, BOM, usually referred to as BOM teachers. Honorable Speaker, since the first case of COVID-19 was reported in Kenya on 13th March 2020 and subsequent closure of schools on 15th March 2020, about 72,000 teachers who form part of the integral teaching force but employed by the boards of management BOM have lost their jobs. Honorable Speaker, today it is over 3 months down the line and this group of teachers remain forgotten despite the fact that they feel the gap of teacher shortage in the country, which stands at over 120,000 teachers. In addition to these teachers are the support staff and teachers in private schools who continue to work without any salary despite the fact that they are key providers of safety and maintenance of schools, even as the schools remain closed today. Honorable Speaker, the Minister of Education, via circular MOE ACC/1/35, Volume 4, 190, addressed to the regional directors of education, county directors of education, and some county directors of education, asked the officers mentioned above to refund the unspent co-curriculum funds. Honorable Speaker, it is on this account that I seek a statement from the chairperson of the Departmental Committee of Education and Research on the following. 1, what is the full budget of the co-curriculum activities, which include music, sports, games, drama, among others? 2, what amounts have been refunded back to the ministry as per the circular MOE ACCT 1/35, Volume 4, 190, and how much was used and for what purposes, given that schools closed early before these activities could take off? Number 3, could the ministry consider allocating these funds to support the over 72,000 teachers on boards of management, BOM, who have been off the payroll since for the last 3 months? 4, could the ministry consider utilizing part of these funds to pay the school and institute support staff who have also been off the payroll for the last 3 months? And finally, 5, what measures is the ministry pursuing or putting in place to ensure that the workers and teachers employed by BOM and support staff are safeguarded during this period of COVID-19? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The answer to the request is sent to the Departmental Committee on Education for a response. And it's like I've been informed the Honorable Omboko Milemba is a member of the committee. The Honorable Omboko Milemba, are you a member of the committee or you're in labor? Or both?
Honorable Speaker, I'm in both.
In both. Very well. I think you can safely hand over that to the chair of, to your chairman.
Conflict of interest. This conflict of interest. Member of Parliament.
Put it there so that you don't touch.
Sergeant at Arms, if there is any member that desires to come in, you can allow them in, because those who had requested seats to be reserved for them for the afternoon sitting must have been aware that the House sits at 2:30, and now 6 minutes past 3. There's no excuse for us. If there are any members who are out there, they can be allowed in, including the member for Emuhaya, if he desires to come back in the chamber. There are responses. The Chairman, Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security, you have some 2 responses.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I have 2 responses. And the first response is to the Honorable Member for John Aluoj for Kisumu West constituency. Honorable Speaker, the Member of Parliament for Kisumu West constituency, Honorable John Aluoj, has requested for statement regarding operationalization of administrative units in Kisumu County. He particularly sought to be informed on the following. A, whether the Cabinet Secretary is aware that via Kenya Gazette Notice number CX1X80 of 21st June 2017, his ministry established administrative and service delivery coordination units by the creation of new sub-counties, divisions, locations, and sub-locations in the county. B, whether the Cabinet Secretary is aware that in Kisumu West, sub-county, Holo Division, Kibwonja, Marera, Newa, and Osiri locations, Newa East, Newa South, Lower Kanyaweng, Lower Osiri, and Maseno Township sublocations, and in Central Kisumu Sub-County, Kanyakwar and Nyalenda locations were created. And C, why the administrative units have not been operationalized through recruiting relevant offices to man them. Honorable Speaker, I wish to state as follows. In the year 2017, the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government gazetted 320 divisions, 1,200 locations, and 2,400 sub-locations. The principal purpose for creation of new administrative units is to bring service closer to the people. Honorable Speaker, the government is aware that the following administrative units were gazetted in Kisumu West and Kisumu Central sub-counties. Sub-county Kisumu, divisions Holo, location Kabwonja, Marera, Newa, Osiri. Sublocation Newa East, Lower Kanyawengi, Newa South, Lower Osiri, Estanganyi, Upper Osiri. And in Kisumu Central Sub-County, Division Kisumu Central, locations Kanyakwar and Nyalenda, and sub-location Upper Kanyawengi. Honorable Speaker, the ministry has not yet received the budgetary allocations to operationalize all the gazetted administrative units as listed above. Once funds are allocated, the ministry will implement the operationalization of all the gazetted administrative units across the county, including Kisumu West and Kisumu Central sub-counties. However, in the meantime, and to ensure service delivery, all the gazetted administrative units will continue being administered from the administrative units in which they were carved from. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Member for Kisumu West. Any comment on that? Maybe the Honorable The Honorable Olagwaluoch, I don't know whether you're able to follow the response given. Were you able to follow the response that was given by the Honorable?
Yes, I did, Mr. Speaker, from the launch.
And that's why I thought maybe you needed a fast
Although
chance.
I was not notified, but by luck I was in the launch.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, I've had the response. I'm satisfied, and I will follow up with the chairman and the CS later.
Okay,
Thank you.
very well. Honorable Koinange, you had another response. You could do it. Can you get him? Give him the.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker.
I would suggest that you don't read out the request. Just read the response.
Okay, thank you,
The
Honorable.
questioner knows what it is that they sought.
Thank you, Honorable
as to
Speaker.
save time.
Yes. And also to add in regard to the authorization of administrative units, Honorable Speaker, I want to, because of the interest of the other members, we have already made it clear to the Ministry of Interior that since 2016, they should have actually advertised in phases, and this is after 5 years, they could have also almost completed all the gazetted areas. So I'm sure they're going to start that process. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, and this is a statement brought up by Honorable David Ochieng. On 14th March 2020, the Minister for Health announced the first COVID-19 case of the county in the country and issued guidelines under the Public Health Act to control and prevent its spread, including prohibition of public gatherings. To implement the guidelines, the Minister for Interior and Coordination of National Government issued the Public Order State Curfew, Order 2020, imposing curfew hours from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. As the COVID-19 cases increased, restrictions were imposed to and from the counties of Mombasa, Nairobi, Kilifi, Kwale, Mandera, and lately Kakuma and Dadaab refugee camps. Honorable Speaker, the Inspector General issued instructions on the implementation of the curfew order and travel restrictions, emphasizing on the need for upholding the rule of law and exercising restraint in its implementation. Honorable Speaker, the procedure of taking people to quarantine facilities is per guideline from the Ministry of Health, and the process is supervised by a Ministry of Health officials. The police officers are only deployed to provide security, prevent, escape, or tracing and returning of escapees as may be required by the responsible head of the medical team. Further, police commanders have enhanced supervision of subordinate officers and are intervening where necessary. Any complaint or misconduct by any police officer that cannot be resolved by the immediate commanding officer is subject to investigation by the Internal Affairs Unit of the National Police Service or the Independent Police Oversight Authority, depending on the circumstances and nature of the complaint. Currently, officers who have been implicated in misconduct while enforcing the curfew orders are interdicted while investigations are ongoing. Upon completion of investigations, disciplinary action will be taken or where it is deemed necessary based on the evidence, criminal prosecution will be undertaken. Honorable Speaker, the government has taken the following measures to ensure that police officers are protected from COVID-19 while dealing with the public. 1, Station commanders have been instructed to raise the level of cleanliness of the police station and the surroundings. 2, any suspect and that exhibits signs of sickness while in police custody are immediately taken to the hospital for medical examination. And 3, officers on duty are observing guidelines for the prevention of COVID-19 in their interaction with the suspects and those who seek police services. Third, 4, water and soap have been installed at the stations for washing of hands. And all suspects are presented to court at the shortest time possible, including release of traffic and petty offenders on cash bail or police bond to avoid crowding in the police station and minimizing of contact between individuals. And also to enhance the safety of police while carrying out their duties, personal protective equipment and sanitizers have been procured and distributed to police stations. And Honorable Speaker, any person with a valid reason to be out during curfew hours is allowed safe passage during the sick and their caregivers going to and from hospitals. Those who are bereaved are also allowed a specific number of people to proceed for funeral preparation and burial while observing social distancing guidelines and wearing of protective facial masks. The regional and county police commanders are issuing letters of authority to those who present justification to travel to other counties that are under enhanced COVID-19 prevention. And finally, Honorable Speaker, police officers under instruction to be on the alert of any cases of victimization and to immediately arrest and present to court any person that may violate another for being suspected to the suffering from COVID-19. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Chair of Education. You had come on board. I don't know what you have done.
Thank you. Yes, it's okay now, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to respond to a statement by Honorable Geoffrey Omuse. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 44.2c, the Honorable Geoffrey Omuse, MP, requested for a statement on 5th of May 2020 from the Chairperson, Department of Community Education and Research, regarding the government's preparedness on the e-learning due to COVID-19. Honorable Speaker, it is worth to note that the matter in question was conclusively addressed by the Cabinet Secretary for Education in a session of the committee held on 7th of May 2020, following your direction, arising from similar requests by various members of this House. Indeed, a record number of members attended this meeting, which was also streamed live in several mainstream media houses. Nonetheless, Honorable Speaker, the committee wrote to the Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Education, seeking response to the request by Honorable Member, which I beg to lay on the table. Honorable Speaker, this was actually conclusively done within this House for a period of around 7 hours. And I want to thank Honorable Members who actually came for that particular meeting with the CS, and it was ventilated well and conclusively done. So I beg to lay this particular statement. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. The Chairman, National Government CDF Committee.
Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to the provision of Standing Order 44.2c, I rise to issue a statement in regard to the status of receipts and disbursement of funds to constituencies as at June 3rd, 2020. Mr. Speaker, receipts from the National Treasury, A, financial year 2019 to 2020, the board was allocated 41,749,000,000 in financial year 2019-2020, out of which 26 has been received to date. The funds were received between October 15, 2019 and 18th of May 2020, totaling 26 billion shillings. B, pending arrears for the previous financial years. So the board has pending receipts from the National Treasury amounting to 4,976,750,000 relating to financial years 2011 and 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2014, 2015, which has not been received to date. So the breakdown of the arrears is as follows. 2011, 2012, the arrears was 541,750,000. 2013, 2014 was 2,128,500. 2014, 2015 was 2,306,000,000 and 500,000, totaling 4,976,000,000 and 750,000. So the disbursement of funds to the constituencies and the Secretariat in the financial year 2019-2020, the board has disbursed funds to constituencies as follows. 13 constituencies have received full amounts allocation amounting to 1,785,780,413. Then 261 constituencies have received between 45% and 99% of the funds allocated, amounting to 18,626,000,000 and 81,592. Then 16 constituencies have received between 32% and 44% of the funds allocated, amounting to 849 million shillings. Then 3,421,000,000, 937 and 51 has been disbursed to the constituencies with respect to previous financial years allocations. Then 1,337,000,000 has been disbursed to the board secretariat. Now, financial year 2018-2019, the constituencies have received the funds as follows. 180 constituencies have received full allocation amounting to 19,627,357,596. Then 102 constituencies have received between 51 and 99% of the funds allocated, amounting to 10,508,911 and 405. Then 8 constituencies have received 50% of the funds allocated, amounting to 432,000,000 and 500,000 shillings. 1,547,930,000 was disbursed to the board secretariat. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there is an annex listing which constituencies that have received what amounts and what percentages. Thank you.
Yes, what's a point of order, Honorable Junet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, rather to call him former chairman and deputy whip now, or former chairman, or is still the chairman of CDF? Mr. Speaker, both, but let me not go there. Mr. Speaker, the chairman, the information is giving is not factual. I think he was just given as a conveyor belt to go and tell members that this is the position. No, wait, Chairman, wait. Chairman, I mean, Mr. Speaker, more than 50% of constituents have not received any money. 50%. And what the information we wanted from the chairman is how much did each constituency get? Not percentages. Eight constituencies got 50% of their money, 10% got. Mr. Speaker, this is very, very unsatisfactory information, Mr. Speaker. And the chairman must accept, Mr. Speaker, this is a former member of, senior member of parliament. I'm on my feet, he's on his feet. Speaker, which standing order is this? This is not a Njerenjuke meeting. Mr. Speaker, this is parliament. Mr. Speaker, he's calling Njeren. Mr. Speaker, the information he has given to the House, Mr. Speaker, is misleading. And many members will bear witness for me if I'm lying. Mr. Speaker,
can I propose that the statement be tabled, yes, so that at least every member gets a copy? Because I also got a bit worried when it made references to 2014. I don't know 20. So it's not very clear to me. Yes.
I still have the mic.
It would be good for that statement to be tabled so that...
No, Mr. Speaker, the statement is meant to be tabled after I had read. And the best way of addressing, you need to protect members of this House from the excessive bad manners of the comments from Honorable Junet, who is having juvenile behavior, doesn't respect anybody. When we read statements, it is comprehensive. If he has a problem of comprehension, that is not my problem. So, Mr. Speaker, I have put in the details of the constituencies that have received full amounts, has 13 constituencies.
Wait, you just point of order, Mr. Speaker.
You know, a statement like this one, knowing the number of members.
But Mr. Speaker, I'm just explaining.
Honorable Maure, let me just try to rescue. A statement like this one, because it's supposed to go to virtually every member from the 290 constituencies.
Yes.
The best thing would have been if you have several copies of it, so that as you give now, every member would have been able to ask, where do I fall, where, how far, how much has come, what percent, and all those things about percentages.
I meant that there are some constituencies which have received the full amounts, others 50%, others 40%, and others even less than 32. That is the data in this statement.
Does that statement contain those,
yes,
those which have received full amounts?
Yes. Oh, those are the kind of questions you should be asking about the logistics. It's between your fund manager and the board, not the chairman of the CDF committee.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, point of order. Point of order. Maura, you're running away from the matter. No. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the chairman is misleading the House, Mr. Speaker, and he must own it up. Mr. Speaker, he's saying 13 constituencies have received full amount. That is a general statement. Can you tell us, when are we getting our money? That's what we're asking you.
No, honourable members, as I'm suggesting, that, which I think is a better route, let this statement be, the clerk would make copies so that at least every member, when you next come into the chamber, or whichever other station you may be allocated, you pick a copy so that when you are raising the questions, it will be specific and to addressing a particular shortcoming evenly from the statement, so that then the chair can be able to respond. Because now there's nothing to, this statement is, many of you don't have it. I don't know, now nobody knows, other than the chairman, nobody knows which of the 13 constituents, because they have not been named, but maybe they are named in the report. So it would be better if everybody got a copy of the report. Now, you know, then the next question will be.
No, Mr. Speaker, what happened is that the lists, the categories of those who have received, there are 13 constituencies which have received 100%. Galole constituency, Garizeni, Gilgil, Kamukunji, Huisero, Kipkelion West, Lamu East, Likuyani, Lugari, Lungalunga, Rabai, Rongo, and the Suba South. Now, that's not my question. That's a technical problem, that one. Then there are others who have received 45 to 99%. Those are 261 constituencies. So, muendelee namna hiyo.
No, I think because today was not today. I think it's not today. If we go because there are so many of you who want now to ask this or the other question. I am the one ruling now. Once I have ruled, there cannot be a point of order. I have directed that statement be photocopied and be supplied to all members on a day to be appointed next week. The chair will come and respond. You can't inform me, you have no capacity. Now, honourable members, because there is a heavy business before you, I want to call on the leader of majority to move a particular procedural motion.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 30, subsection 3A, this House orders that should the time appointed for adjournment of the House be reached before the conclusion of business appearing under Order number 9 on today's order paper, the sitting of the House shall stand extended until the conclusion of the said business. And Mr. Speaker, the said business is none other than the report of the Budget and Appropriation Committee on the budget estimates for the financial year 2020-2021. And of course, order number 9 is the second reading of the refugee bill as is appearing on the order paper. Speaker, usually, and we passed a procedural motion last week, that both the report of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, the report of the Finance Committee on the Finance Bill, and the Committee of Supply, which most probably will deal with next week, will not be subject to the motion on the 2-hour rule. And because the budget and appropriation is a very, very important and fundamental, not only to this House as a budget-making process, but to the nation. And we want to give each and every member this morning must find an opportunity to contribute. So we don't want to hurry. Even if we'll be here until 9, we must conclude it before the end of day, which is midnight, so that the Minister for Finance will have time to use that report tomorrow in order to prepare the budget highlights for 2020-2021, both on estimates, recurrent and expenditure and development vote for this financial year on Thursday in accordance with his colleagues in the East African community. So this procedural motion just to make sure that in the event we reach 7 p.m. and there are still members who have not contributed to this motion on the budget, we will not adjourn the House. We will continue until the last person make sure that you speak before midnight. But if we conclude early and there's nobody who is on record and wants to speak on it, then the question can be put to Mr. Speaker. So I beg to move this and ask Honorable Bandi, member of the House Business Committee and the leader of minority, to second.
Honorable Bandi.
Mr. Speaker, you know, we say that there are three functions of a member of parliament. That is legislation, oversight, and representation. But I think we should add budgeting as a very important and significant role of National Assembly. And this is to the National Assembly. And so, this is a very important period. We need to allow members sufficient and adequate time to contribute to the budget estimates. This is the time that you can speak for your people and mention things that this budget has not captured and that you'd require or you expect to be captured in the next or subsequent budgets. So, Mr. Speaker, that's why we are requesting the House to allow for the extension of time to allow as many members as possible to contribute, and bearing in mind that we have to conclude this debate today because on Thursday, when the CS will be expected in this House, he can only mention the figures that are in this report after the report is passed. Otherwise, he will be speculating if he mentions the figures in his budget highlights. So, Mr. Speaker, I second.
Where's the motion? Where's the motion? Honourable members, I propose the question, which is that notwithstanding the provisions of standing order number 30, subsection 3, paragraph A, this House orders that should the time appointed for adjournment of the House be reached before conclusion of the business appearing under order number 9 on today's order paper, the sitting of the House shall stand extended until conclusion of the said business. Member of the House, I put the question that notwithstanding the provisions of standing order number 30, subsection 3, paragraph A, this House orders that should the time appointed for adjournment of the House be reached before conclusion of business appearing under order number 9 on today's order paper, the sitting of the House shall stand extended until conclusion of the said business. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as that opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honourable members, before we move to the next order, even as a member for Homa Bay Town finds a seat, I have this communication, honourable members, on entitlement of slots in select committees and discharge of a member from select committees by parliamentary parties. Honourable members, as you will recall, on Tuesday, 2nd of June 2020, the member for Ugenya, the Honourable David Ochieng, MP, rose on a point of order under standing orders 172, 173, and 176, requesting for my considered guidance on 6 issues. The crux of his issues was whether a member belonging to a party other than a parliamentary party may be discharged from a committee of the House by any parliamentary party. To this end, the member did inform the House that he had received a letter from the minority party whip notifying him of the party's intention to discharge him from the Departmental Committee on Health pursuant to the provision of Standing Order 176. I also wish to inform the House that the member also wrote to the Speaker listing the 6 issues for which he sought my guidance. Honourable members, having reviewed the issues raised by the member for Ugenya and others canvassed by the leader of the majority party, the leader of the minority party, and other members who spoke on the issue, I've isolated the following 5 matters as the ones requiring my guidance. 1, whether it is the intention of the Constitution and the standing orders that all slots in select committees are to be assigned only to parliamentary parties. 2, whether it is the intention of the Constitution and that the exercise of the roles of the National Assembly under Article 95 of the Constitution in committees is exclusive to members belonging to parliamentary parties to the exclusion of independent members and members belonging to parties other than parliamentary parties. 3, whether the Constitution envisages that the inclusion of independent members and members belonging to parties other than parliamentary parties to serve on committees of the House ought to be the remit only of parliamentary parties. 4, whether a parliamentary party may exercise the discharge powers of a party understanding under 176 to remove a member who is not a member of the particular parliamentary party or coalition of parties from a committee on the basis of having granted the member the nomination to the select committee. And 5, whether there is a lacuna or misapplication of the standing orders with respect to nomination into and discharge of members from committees, and if so, what is the appropriate remedy, if any? Honorable members, the issues for which the members sought my guidance are fundamental to the functioning of the House as they relate to the mode of inclusion and exclusion of a member from the committees of the House. Before I proceed to address the issues for determination, permit me to remind the House that this is not the first time that the Speaker has been invited to guide on questions of membership to select committees and discharge therefrom. Certainly, this is an illustration that one cannot perfectly delink parliamentary politics from the legislature, and that the decision to discipline members is primarily vested in the political parties, but it always finds its way into the legislature. Indeed, permit me to refer to an expository by a Finnish professor of political science, Dr. Kari Palonen, in his write-up titled Parliamentary Procedure as an Inventory of Disputes, a comparison between Jeremy Bentham and Thomas Askin May. And in that write-up, the professor opines that, and I quote, parliamentary politics is inherently procedural. Parliamentary politics is not just politics that takes place in Parliament, but politics conducted in a parliamentary manner, in accordance with the rules and practices of parliamentary procedure, close quotes. Indeed, in the 11th Parliament, I was invited by the leader of the majority party to guide on the application of Standing Order 176 relating to discharge of members from committees. This was after the then Court Coalition discharged the member for Lunga Lunga, the Honorable Hatib Mwashetani MP, and others from several committees. In a considered ruling that I rendered to the House on 30th of November 2016, I addressed the following 3 questions. 1, whether and to what extent Standing Order number 176, as then framed, could be employed as a mechanism for enforcing party discipline for breaches outside the proceedings of the House or its committees. 2, whether the provisions of Standing Order 176, as then framed, were to be applied against members of the House by instigation of or order of persons other than members of the House. And 3, whether Standing Order number 176, as then framed, adequately protected the rights of members in the performance of their functions in the House, and particularly with respect to discharge without an opportunity to be had. Honourable members, I'm not about to restate the details of that ruling, but for the benefit of the House, I hasten to underscore the fact that arising from that, the guidance then, and taking into account the dictates of our Constitution on fair and administrative action, I hitherto put a temporary embargo on further discharge of members from committees by parliamentary parties until the House amended Standing Order number 176 to provide for a mechanism of giving the affected member adequate notice and an opportunity to be heard by the party before effecting the discharge. This was later actualized by amending Standing Order number 176 as reflected now in the 4th edition of the National Assembly Standing Orders. I have intentionally chosen to underscore that particular ruling because it addressed the issue of rights of members, which is also part of the subject of guidance this afternoon. Honourable members, the practice of placing political parties at the center of running parliamentary business has a history. This prompts me to perhaps briefly enlighten the House on the history of parliamentary parties as vehicles for constituting House committees, hence the settling of a threshold of what constitutes a parliamentary party. Members will recall that way back in 1991, the National Assembly repealed Section 2A of the then Constitution and reintroduced multi-party democracy that saw the emergence of many political parties. As a result, political parties took center stage in the running of the affairs of the House, including composition of the then very few committees that were in place at the time. Indeed, the focus of the legislative and oversight functions of the House shifted from the plenary of the House to the committees. At that time, the rules of procedure, which had been amended just before the 1992 general elections, only contemplated two factions in the House, that is, the ruling party and the official opposition party. As a matter of fact, Standing Order number 2 of the 7th Parliament, period between 1992 to 1997, defined official opposition party as the party consisting not less than 30 members. Due to the high number of parties in the House at the time, most of which were neither in the ruling party nor the official opposition party, there was a desire to set minimum thresholds to be met by the rest of the political parties represented in the House to qualify to sit at the bargaining table, as it was then called, to claim any parliamentary opportunity or decide on parliamentary matters. Honourable members, times have changed, and indeed they do change, and so does the scope of democracy. You may agree with me that when society transforms its ways of handling its political affairs through various epochs, it is inevitable that the rules that govern conduct of those affairs will change. Between the 7th and the current 12th Parliament, Standing Order number 2 has been amended severally, including at one time amendments to increase the threshold for a party to be recognized as official opposition, the introduction of an opposition caucus, and the current definition of a parliamentary party, which means a party or a coalition of parties consisting of not less than 5% of the membership of the National Assembly. Honourable members, may I now address the 5 matters that I had isolated at the outset as requiring my guidance. First, you will note that Standing Order number 173 provides that the Committee on Selection shall, in consultation with parliamentary parties, nominate members who shall serve on a select committee. As earlier stated, Standing Order number 2 defines a parliamentary party as a party or coalition of parties consisting of not less than 5% of the membership of the National Assembly, which is essentially 18 members. We are alive to the fact that not all parties represented in the House met the threshold for being recognized as parliamentary parties under Standing Order number 2. Indeed, looking at the current representation of this House vis-à-vis the definition of what constitutes a parliamentary party, permit me to note the following 8 facts, which are of significance to me. 1. The total membership of the National Assembly currently stands at 348 members, noting the vacancy with respect to Msambweni constituency. 2. In terms of political parties, there are 21 parties with representation in the House, out of which only 3 meet the threshold of parliamentary parties. 3, Standing Order number 2 recognizes coalitions, and as such, several other political parties represented in the House qualify as parliamentary parties courtesy of their pre- and post-election coalition agreements. In this regard, out of the 21 parties represented in the House, the Jubilee Coalition, now comprising of the Jubilee Party, which has 172 members, the Kenya African National Union, KANU, which has 10 members, and the Party for Development and Reform, PDR, which has 4 members, has a combined total of 186 members. The National Super Alliance, NASA, coalition, has a total of 126 members, made up of the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM 73, the Wiper Democratic Movement Kenya, WDM-K, 23 members, the Aman National Congress, ANC, 14 members, Fund Kenya, 13 members, Chama cha Mashinani, CCM, which has 2 members, and the Chama cha Uzalendo Party, CCU, with 1 member. 5, there are 12 other parties with representation in the House. According to the records availed to my office by the Registrar of Political Parties, find a letter dated 8th June 2020, which is yesterday, the 12 parties do not belong to any coalition. These are Economic Freedom Party, in brackets EFP, with 5 members in the National Assembly, the Maendeleo Chap Chap Party, MCCP, with 4 members in the National Assembly, the Kenya National Congress Party, KNC, the People's Democratic Party, PDP, the Kenya Patriots Party, each with 2 members in the National Assembly, the Democratic Party of Kenya, DP, the Party of National Unity, PNU, the Frontier Alliance Party, FAP, the National Agenda Party of Kenya, NAPK, the New Democrats, ND, the Muungano Party, each with 1 member in the National Assembly, and the Movement for Democracy and Growth Party, MDG, to which the member for Ugenya belongs. In terms of total membership, these parties, which do not fall within the definition of parliamentary parties, have a total membership of 22 members. 6, there are 14 elected independent members in the House. Since each of them also ought to be independent from the other and are not political parties, none of them would sit at the bargaining table, as was the practice in the 7th Parliament, reserved for parliamentary parties, even if they were to number more than 18 cumulatively. Number 7, adding the number of members belonging to parties which are neither parliamentary parties nor in coalition with any parliamentary party, together with the number of independent members, they total 36. 8, finally. Save for 20 slots reserved by the standing orders for parliamentary office holders, there are currently 622 committee slots in the committee system of this House, which ideally ought to have been shared amongst the membership in a fair and transparent criteria that is in keeping with the full expectations of the Constitution and the provisions of Standing Order 174. Honorable members, with these facts in mind, the questions now that confront the Speaker are, how should the 36 members get to sit in committees? If they are already members of committees, is Standing Order number 176 available to a parliamentary party for the party to exercise the discharge powers therein and discharge any of the 36 members from the committees. Honourable members, Article 1 of the Constitution, provides for the sovereignty of the people of Kenya and to spell out the manner in which the people of Kenya can exercise their sovereign power. In particular, Article 1, Clause 2 provides that the people may exercise their sovereign power either directly or through their democratically elected representatives. It therefore follows that each elected representative in this House, whether elected through a parliamentary party, a party other than a parliamentary party, or indeed an independent member, exercises the sovereign power of the people the member represents in the House. This is also why Part 3 of Chapter 7 of the Constitution on the representation of the people, which is a whole part with various provisions on political parties, does not distinguish between parliamentary parties and other parties. It deliberately refers to all political parties. To interpret, therefore, that the members from parties other than parliamentary political parties should be disenfranchised due to their few numbers in the House is to introduce a criteria that is not contemplated in the Constitution. Moreover, Article 85 of the Constitution recognizes and permits any person to stand as an independent candidate for election if the person is not a member of a political party. It cannot therefore be that independent members who are also democratically elected representatives of the people for purposes of Article 1 of the Constitution should be excluded from sitting in committees on the basis that they do not belong to a parliamentary party. Suffice to say, no rule or interpretation can be used to take away, disadvantage, limit, stifle, or restrict that which the Constitution has laid out in plain and clear terms as being permitted. To do so would be an attempt to rewrite the Constitution without amending it. Article 95 of the Constitution is also clear on the role of a member of Parliament in the National Assembly, which includes representation, legislation, oversight, budget making, and vetting of public appointees, among other key roles. Undoubtedly, this is one of the architectural features and designs of a presidential system of governance, where every representation in the House counts and every member in the House counts. If a member of Parliament is to discharge these duties through committees, would it hold that a member should be denied the right to exercise these functions on the basis that he or she belongs to a party other than a parliamentary political party or is an independent member? If that were the case, would this also imply that the people of the constituencies represented by such members ought to be disenfranchised by being excluded from having a fair chance to participate in the parliamentary aspects that take place in committees? This definitely cannot be the case, and to argue otherwise would severely negate the principle of participation of the people through their elected or democratically elected representatives, which is enshrined in our Constitution. In addition, honourable members, while appreciating that Kenya is a multi-party democratic state as spelled out in Article 4 of the Constitution, you will agree that insofar as representation is concerned, it is not the intention of this provision to inhibit the participation of any member of the House from undertaking the collective roles and functions of Parliament and the National Assembly in particular, as provided for under Articles 94 and 95 of the Constitution, on account of the medium under which the member was elected or nominated into the House. Further, my reading of Article 85 does not in any way imply that members elected as independent candidates are less important legislators. Honourable members, it's also notable that standing under 174 subsection 2 provides as follows, and I quote, "Despite paragraph 1, a member belonging to a party other than a parliamentary party or independent member may be nominated to serve in a select committee, and the allocation of membership of select committees shall be as nearly as practicable proportional to the number of members belonging to such parties and independent members. Close the quotes. It is therefore clear, honourable members, that a member belonging to a party other than a parliamentary party is equally entitled to serve in a committee of the House. That provision in our standing orders even contemplated a situation where a substantial number of members of the House would belong to small parties or would be independent members. The manner in which standing order 174.2 is coached also finds its footing from other comparable Commonwealth jurisdictions, and indeed, according to the latest Commonwealth Parliamentary Association recommended benchmarks for democratic legislatures on committees, organization, and allow me to quote, the legislature's assignment of committee members on each committee shall include both majority and minority party members and reflect the political composition of the legislature. Close the quote. Honourable members, I wish to emphasize the ones reflect the political composition of the legislature, because this is what standing order 174.2 tries to achieve by recognizing that a member belonging to a party other than a parliamentary party is equally entitled to serve in a committee of the House. Otherwise, committees without such members cannot be seen to be reflective of the political composition of the legislature. Undoubtedly, we must be alive to the fact that this House has composition not just from the parliamentary parties, but from other parties and independents. This must be reflected in our committees. It is one which cannot be wished away, because even looking at the statistics from the 11th Parliament to date, the composition of the membership of this House has seen more members from small parties and independents being elected to the House. Certainly, this may arguably continue to grow exponentially in an upward trajectory even in the future. It is therefore obviously erroneous to advance the idea that the Constitution or the standing orders envisaged that committees are a preserve of the parliamentary parties to the exclusion of the independent members and members belonging to small parties. This, honourable members, I believe settles the first and second issues that required my determination. Honourable members, in addressing the third issue, I reflected on the views advanced by the leader of the minority party that members belonging to parties other than parliamentary parties and independent members ought to choose and align themselves with the existing parliamentary parties so as to earn consideration for a slot in committees. While in so arguing, the leader of the minority party, the Honourable John Bandi, was perfectly within his rights. It is my considered view that that position does not stand well with the provisions of Articles 94, 95, and 103 of the Constitution, and standing under 174.2 of our standing orders. And it's instructive to point out that Article 103 of the Constitution provides, among other things, the ways by which a member of this House vacates his seat or her seat. One of the ways being, if having been elected as an independent, the member joins a political party. It therefore will not hold that we force independents to align themselves with any party. Ideally, a member elected on a political party ticket is so elected based on a resolve to ascribe to the party's philosophy, manifesto, and ideals. Similarly, a member elected as an independent candidate does so as a matter of principle due to political circumstances or for other reasons known to him or her. Therefore, to resort to coercing such member to affiliate with a parliamentary party so as to earn a slot in committees, notwithstanding that they possibly were competitors in the elections, is essentially to compel them to denounce their stand in exchange for the committee slot. Indeed, The consequence of such a move may expose him or her to the sanctions contemplated under Article 103, Clause 1, Paragraph E of the Constitution, read together with Section 14 of the Political Parties Act 2012, which I've already indicated. Honourable members, to advance the view of the minority leader that an independent member or one from a small party ought to be aligned to a parliamentary party to earn a slot in the committee would amount to assuming that the three parliamentary parties currently also have the authority to shut the door of this chamber from any member who is independent or who is elected on a small party and admit such member into the plenary only if he or she undertook to align with the parliamentary parties. Ideally, as is the practice in the chamber and indeed in the committee system of many other multi-party legislatures, the issue of lobbying and enticing the smaller parties comes in after they are already in the committees as members. It is therefore inconceivable that the Constitution or the standing orders contemplated that an independent member or a member belonging to a party other than a parliamentary party would get to sit in a committee only if they are affiliated with a parliamentary party. Since standing order 174.2 is clear, I must assert respectively so that I find the opinion that members belonging to parties other than parliamentary parties and independent members ought to choose and align themselves to the existing parliamentary parties so as to earn consideration for a slot in committees as being a perfect example of misapplication of the Constitution and the standing orders. Let me now turn to the fourth issue of whether a parliamentary party may exercise the discharge powers of a party under Standing Order 176 to remove a member who is not a member of the particular parliamentary party or coalition of parties from a committee on the basis of having granted the member the nomination to the committee. To address that question, I will refer to the provision of Standing Order 176, which provides for the discharge of members from committees. In particular, Standing Order 176.1 provides, and I quote, parliamentary party may discharge a member from a select committee after according the member an opportunity to be heard. A fair reading of the same standing order indicates that the responsibility of discharging members from committees is placed on parliamentary parties. From the onset, the question of who donated the position occupied by the members belonging to parties other than parliamentary parties or independent members is no longer tenable. This is because, as I have already observed from the three preceding questions, I've addressed, and the plain reading of Standing Order 174.2, all members should have a fair chance to sit in at least one committee without appearing to entreat or beg any other party for a reasonable opportunity. If that is not what actually is transpired, it is said that two wrongs do not make a right. As leaders, we ought to correct the wrongs whenever we encounter them. To this end, it's apparent that no parliamentary party may discharge a member unless the member belongs to or formally affiliates with the parliamentary party by way of a coalition agreement as contemplated under the Political Parties Act. This is because the exercise of the discharge powers under Standing Order 176 ought to be exercised by a parliamentary party only on members belonging to that party. Honourable members, in the case of the member for Ugenya, it is a fact that he was elected on the platform of the Movement for Democracy and Growth, MDG, party, and he is the single member elected in this House on that party's ticket. To the best of my knowledge, and from the information availed to my office by the Registrar of Political Parties yesterday, the MDG party is not part of the parties forming the majority party or the minority coalition in the House. It therefore follows that neither the minority party nor the majority party may exercise the discharge powers under Standing Order 176 on the member for Ugenya at the moment. On the secondary question of whether the Committee on Selection acted equitably in allocating the member for Ugenya one committee Standing Order 174 is clear on the criteria used by the Committee on Selection to nominate members to serve in a select committee. This includes ensuring that the allocation of membership of select committees is as nearly as practicable proportional to the number of members belonging to parties other than parliamentary parties and independent members. It is, however, notable that Standing Order 174.3 further provides, and I quote, except as the House may otherwise resolve on the recommendation of the Committee on Selection for reasons to be stated, A, no member shall be appointed to serve in more than 2 departmental committees, close the quotes. It is therefore clear within the prerogative of the Committee on Selection to nominate members to serve in at least 1 or more committees. It therefore follows that the jurisdiction to determine whether the member should serve in 1 or 2 committees lies with the Committee on Selection and this House when approving the motions for appointment of members to respective committees. Honourable members, let me now address the final question of whether there is lacuna or misapplication of the standing orders with respect to nomination to or discharge of members from committees and what would be an appropriate remedy. As I have observed, it is incorrect to assume that the Constitution or indeed the standing orders envisaged that committees be a preserve of parliamentary parties to the exclusion of independent members and members belonging to small parties. In this regard, the primary formula of allocation of members to serve in committees ought to have embraced a criteria where a proportion of total membership to committees would be allocated to parliamentary parties based on their relative majorities, but at the same time also reserve a proportion of seats for independent members and members belonging to parties that are not parliamentary parties. To guarantee fairness, the criteria ought to look at the totality of slots available, isolate the slots that are to be shared by parliamentary parties, and share out to the existing parliamentary parties in accordance with their numerical strength in the House as required under Standing Order 174, subsection 1, paragraph A. When it comes to members belonging to parties other than parliamentary parties and the independents, the criteria ought to ensure that such members serve on at least 1 committee as required under Standing Order 174.2. This will correct the misapplication of the standing orders and the erroneous impression that such members must first affiliate with parliamentary parties to serve in committees. Honourable members, having said that, I'm inclined to observe that part of the terms in Standing Orders 173, 174, and 176, as currently coached, do not guarantee fairness to independent members and members belonging to political parties other than parliamentary parties. For instance, Standing Order 173.1 on nomination of members to select committee provides, and I quote, unless otherwise provided by any written law or these standing orders, the Committee on Selection shall, in consultation with parliamentary parties, nominate members who shall serve on a select committee. Close the quotes. As presently framed, the provision does not contemplate consultations with independents or political parties that do not meet the threshold set out in Standing Order number 2 for recognition as parliamentary parties. For political parties, they may have to designate a spokesperson to advance their interests, even when they do not qualify to be a parliamentary party. The case is worse for independents because, as a matter of fact, each independent member is independent of the other, and no matter how many they could be in the House, they cannot be construed as a political formation. While parliamentary parties ordinarily consult with the Committee on Selection through their party leaders and whips, there is no mechanism in the standing orders for consultations with smaller political parties and independents when it comes to sharing of the slots in select committees. Honourable members, allow me, however, to note that even with the shortcomings that are occasioned by the manner in which Standing Order 174-2 is coached, the Standing Order envisaged a ratio in which the slots for committee membership would be shared, taking into account the independent members and members belonging to parties other than the parliamentary parties. It is therefore obvious that at the commencement of this parliament, there was a misapplication of the Standing Order in the criteria that was used to share committee slots. In the end, the criteria used did not ensure that the independent members and members belonging to parties other than parliamentary parties got their rightful share in terms of committee membership. Taking into consideration the 622 slots available for sharing out, a fair criteria that is in keeping with the provision of Standing Order 174-2 ought to have arrived at a committee's distribution outcome, which is approximately close to the following quotas. A, Jubilee Coalition, with a combined total of 186 members in the House, is entitled to a total of 330 slots spread out in committees to be shared between the members of the three parties that form the Jubilee Coalition, that is the Jubilee Party, KANU, and PDR. B, the National Super Alliance, NASA, coalition, comprising of the Orange Democratic Movement, ANC, and Ford Kenya, Chama cha Mashinani, and Chama cha Uzalendo, is entitled to a total of 226 slots in the committees to be shared out amongst the 126 members who make up that coalition. The Economic Freedom Party, EFP, is entitled to a total of 8 slots in the committees to share out among its 5 members. D, Maendeleo Chap Chap Party is entitled to 7 slots in committees to share amongst its 4 members. E, the People's Democratic Party, Kenya Patriots Party, Kenya National Congress, with 2 members each, are entitled to 4 slots each in committees. F, Frontier Alliance Party, the Party of National Unity, the Democratic Party, the National Agenda Party of Kenya, Muungano Party, New Democrats, the Movement for Democracy and Growth, MDG, each with 1 member in the House, are entitled to 2 slots per party in our committees. Finally, G, the 14 independent members are cumulatively entitled to share out 25 slots amongst themselves in the committees. From these numbers, it can be seen that there are 36 members who are either independent members or from small parties that do not meet the threshold of parliamentary parties pursuant to the standing orders and are not in any coalition. These members are thus cumulatively entitled to approximately a total of 66 slots out of the 622 slots available in committees in the House. Honourable members, with regard to discharge of members from select committees, it is clear that Standing Order 1761 does not contain mechanisms for discharging members belonging to political parties other than a parliamentary party and the independents. And for avoidance of doubt, it is clear that a parliamentary party may only discharge a member from a select committee after according the member an opportunity to be heard. As members will remember, this particular aspect was added in the current standing orders for the edition at the tail end of the last parliament. By not providing for de-whipping of members from political parties other than a parliamentary party and the independents, the standing order leaves room for unwarranted speculations that parliamentary parties may stretch their tentacles to also discharge such members, even as such members are also subject to the disciplinary sanctions of their respective primary parties, however small they may be. Needless to say, the smaller parties, which are not considered as parliamentary parties, have no effective avenue for discharging members. Nevertheless, The Committee on Selection ought to be at liberty to propose to the House the reallocation of committee memberships to ensure balance as envisaged under Standing Order 174.2. Now, members, allow me now to contrast the foregoing comparative cases from the sister parliament of Uganda, which has a total of 83 independent members of parliament. From a reading of Standing Order 157 of the National Assembly of the Republic of Uganda, entitlement of slots in committees in the Parliament of Uganda with respect to members elected through political parties is pegged on parties represented in Parliament without any threshold being set. For independent members, the standing orders have assigned the responsibility to the Speaker in mandatory terms. A practice has also emerged where independent members elect one of themselves as the Dean of Independents, who liaises with the Speaker in allocating seats to independent members. In terms of discharge from select committees, the standing orders of the Parliament of Uganda vest the power to discharge party-sponsored members in the sponsoring parties, provided that the member so discharged is relocated to another committee. It is noteworthy that just like those of the National Assembly of Kenya, the standing orders of Parliament of Uganda are silent on the discharge procedure for independent members. It is also good to appreciate that there are lessons that this House may draw from the Parliament of Uganda, particularly on the matter of ensuring fairness and equity in access to slots in select committees for all members, irrespective of them belonging to a parliamentary party, political party, other than a parliamentary political party, or independently elected. Honourable members, in the House of Commons of the United Kingdom, the members of a select committee, other than a chair, elected by the House, are appointed by way of a motion in the House. Motions in respect of most select committees are made on behalf of the Committee of Selection. The House of Commons has endorsed a principle that in proposing nominations for select committee membership for the Committee on Selection or the government to put to the House, parties should elect members to select committees in a secret ballot or whichever other transparent and democratic method they choose. On the other hand, in the House of Commons of Canada, it is the House and the House alone that appoints the members and associate members to its committees, as well as the members who represent it in joint committees. The Speaker has ruled that this is a fundamental right of the House. The committees themselves have no powers at all in this regard. In the vast majority of cases, the House sets the number or the maximum number of members of each committee. The number of members to be selected from each of the recognized parties is subject to negotiations among the parties at the beginning of each parliament. The resulting agreement is not set down in the standing orders, but reflected in the composition of each committee, which generally reflects the proportions of the various parties represented in the House. In the National Assembly of Zambia, the mechanism for establishing select committees is anchored in Standing Order 135. In a radical departure from the practice here and across other jurisdictions, selection of members to select committees is domiciled in the office of the Speaker. And it provides as follows, and I quote, "Unless otherwise directed by the Standing Orders Committee, the Speaker shall determine the number of and nominate the members to serve on a select committee." Close the quotes. Honourable members, let me be clear here that I have no intention of moving this House to domicile nomination of members to serve on select committees to the Speakership. What I'm deducing from this, the same provision, and that of the Parliament of Uganda, is that the mechanism for selecting members to serve on select committees is designed in a manner to afford every member a fair opportunity to discharge their constitutional roles through committees, just as they do in the plenary. I can only urge the House to embrace that spirit and propose a mechanism to actualize it. Honourable members, turning to the question of appropriate remedy, there is need to review part of our standing orders relating to the criteria for nomination to select committees and discharge of members from committees. The review should not weaken the grip, and mark my words, the review should not weaken the grip that parliamentary parties have on allocation of slots in committees and invocation of the discharge rule as a tool for enforcing party discipline, but should stretch the democratic space in the House with a view to incorporating fairness and inculcating the expectations of Articles 1, 94, 95, 96, and 103 of our Constitution in the criteria for sharing of their constitutional roles, particularly budget making, scrutiny of legislation, and vetting of appointments that are carried out in committees without any curtailment in the standing orders. In conclusion, honourable members, you will now agree with me that it will be procedurally improper and a sanction of recurrence of a procedural error if I were to permit the discharge from committees of members belonging to small political parties and the independents by parliamentary parties which have not entered into formal coalition agreements with the small parties. To this end, it is my considered view that I rule as follows. 1, that the exercise of the discharge powers of a party under Standing Order 176 is restricted to members belonging to the particular parliamentary party and those from other small parties who have entered into formal coalition agreements. 2, that no parliamentary party is to exercise the discharge powers of a party under Standing Order 176 to remove a member who is not a member of the particular parliamentary party from any committee of the House, even on the basis of having granted the member the nomination to the particular committee, as that conception is based on misapplication of the standing orders, where it's argued that it was a donation. 3, that since the member for Ugenya constituency, the Honorable David Ochieng, neither belongs to any parliamentary party, nor has his Movement for Democracy and Growth Party entered into a coalition agreement with any of the parliamentary parties, the notice given by the minority party whip to discharge the member from the Departmental Committee on Health was erroneous, ab initio, and therefore invalid. 4, that in view of the continued misapplication of Standing Order 174, by assuming that all committee slots are reserved to the exclusive distribution to the membership of the parliamentary parties, thereby alienating the independent members and members belonging to parties other than parliamentary parties, soon as possible, the Committee on Selection, in consultation with the Procedured House Rules Committee, does devise a criteria for nomination of members to committees that guarantees that members who belong to parties other than parliamentary parties and independent members also get their rightful share of the 622 slots available for sharing in committees. This may include proposals for registration of desired committees and the use of lots as a means of determining how to place such members in the entitled slots, few as they may be. 5, that the Procedured House Rules Committee does initiate the process of proposing amendments to the standing orders so as to expressly provide for the said criteria. The committee may also propose the manner of ordinary reallocations of the slots in committees corporately reserved for independent members and parties other than parliamentary parties amongst the independent members and those belonging to the small parties that do not constitute parliamentary parties. And finally, honourable members, that in the meantime, I will not admit any requests to discharge any member who is an independent member or belongs to a party other than a parliamentary party from a committee until such time as the criteria has been developed or the standing orders accordingly amended to entrench fairness and justice to all. The House is accordingly guided. I thank you, no members. Sorry, honourable members, I knew this was long, but given that we are in interesting times, we are living in interesting times, it was good that we do it now, as opposed to waiting for more than a week. The other one next week. And I'm happy that the Honorable TJ Kajwang, who is a senior member of the Procedure and House Rules Committee, was in the House. Yes, Honorable Bandi.
Mr. Speaker, while I appreciate your ruling, which I think is very exhaustive and actually took a lot of work in it, and I want to congratulate you for it. Mr. Speaker, two things have come out. One, which is a bit interesting, is that now belonging to parliamentary parties is a disadvantage. It's going to be a disadvantage, Mr. Speaker, in this House, because you can easily be disciplined, you can be removed from committees, but then if you belong to briefcase party, you are very lucky. The moment you get into these committees, it's hard to get out. And Mr. Speaker, it will sending a message to us who belong to these big parties that in future we'll be very careful in which committees we give these other members. But Mr. Speaker, again, what I also noticed, Mr. Speaker, which I think we are going to do, is that it appears now the selection committee, and I'm happy that that window is there, that the selection committee is going to look at the committees afresh. You are giving us a very good opportunity now to deal even better with these members, Mr. Speaker, because again, if you are now from a small party, an independent party, and you have been enjoying some committees which my members who have fought so hard to make my party big should belong to, rest assured, now if I take you to broadcasting committee, don't complain. And I'm very sure that Honorable Ochieng will find himself in the broadcasting committee. Because, Mr. Speaker, he cannot occupy a slot in health committee, which is a very significant committee, and is in a tiny committee which is now not affiliated to my party. So, Mr. Speaker, I wanted just to send a message to those who are celebrating that some window has been opened to us very well through selection committee, and we are going to make sure, actually they are going to have committees, but the best that some of them will get is probably catering. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Majority, I think
Mr. Speaker, your communication this afternoon, we are not going to challenge it, but it's a very, very, I can call it a landmark communication, and I think one of the communications that has completely, in my opinion, even as the chairman of the selection committee, will make me go home tonight to go and ponder on standing order from standing order 173 all the way to 174, because we thought, Honorable Speaker, I think the distance, the distance. Speaker, I thought in this country we were going towards, other developed democracies like in the US and in the UK, where we will have two major political parties. But from this afternoon, I've realized independents are not independent, but they have rights, which is very, very true based on the Constitution. That there are people who, when I became the chair of selection, there are people who coalesced around us. And today you have, for the first time, I think you have given a formula to work on by the selection committee. The only question is, how does that formula work? You have told us, Jubilee and our affiliates, those who have signed pre and post, our numbers. You have given NASA. The Speaker, even, it is very good that you have said it. The two members from Chama cha Mashinani were my members. After signing a coalition with NASA, they wrote a letter to Parliament for Honorable Isaac Ruto, saying that now they can work with Jubilee. So right now, I think I will distribute those two members back to NASA because, because the numbers you have given me, they don't belong to me. So in fact, I have 2 slots. Then you have given NASA coalition their numbers. And you have given each member, including Honorable Chachu, Honorable Ochieng is not alone. Honorable Chachu is also one member of party. Honorable Senior Counsel, one of the active members is also a DP, one member. So tonight, today, I think what you have said is something, a communication that will go, but 2 things must happen, Mr. Speaker. I think the standing orders must be reviewed as fast as possible. In fact, based on what you have said, your communication, I cannot implement it as the chair of selection committee based on the new communication you have given. But I'm sure the speaker's communication becomes part of the it's like the Constitution, the standing orders, precedents, speaker's committee. So we abide by that. And I think myself and the Honorable Leader of Minority, we will go scratch our head. Honorable TJ Kajwang, I think, and your team in the House Procedure Rules, you need to act very fast. Because the whole architecture, based on the Constitution, has been configured. At least I'm happy now. I know my numbers. I know my members. So members from Mashinani, you either sign with us Jubilee post-election, like Kanu. You sign with us post-election coalition as soon as possible, or you go back to NASA. Because the letter your party leader wrote does not hold anymore. So it's now the question, the Speaker is quoting the registrar of political parties. Mr. Speaker, my worry is one. Those of us, who believe in big parties. And I can tell you, going this way, in the 13th Parliament, there will be a lot of independents. The independents now, there are 14, and not only in Kenya, I think everywhere in the world, even in the House of Commons. So the independence will increase. The people with small parties like David Ochieng will increase. But those of us who believe in big parties, we will not deter, we will still maintain. I'm sure even those who went to independence, even those who went to small parties, they didn't go there because they wanted it. Maybe there was 1 or 2 reasons, and the reason might not be there. But Mr. Speaker, I think through the clerk, and today the clerk is here, we'll move very fast, ask the House Procedure Rules to sit very fast and then amend all the standing orders from 174 to 176. So that report comes here and we debate it. So that I agree with you. We are colleagues, we are members of parliament, we have roles. But the other thing you have not, maybe Speaker, I didn't see here, is then in this kind of communication, then the independents must have a member in the selection committee, while at the same time you said an independent member is independent of the other one. So I'm wondering how the 14 independents will select one, because they cannot sit all the 14 in the selection panel. Even now, I don't know how Ochieng and Honorable Chachu and the fewer in one members, how they all fit in the selection. So the selection panel committee, which I chair, I think must have all the 36. All the 36, because they are 14 plus 22. They are 36. Then our whips and ourselves. So I think even that is an area Honorable TJ and the other team must look at. What will be the composition of the selection committee? Who will represent the independents? Who will represent each and every small party? But I think I want to say it, and I've asked even last week, Speaker's communication of this, and I think today was one of the longest. I think each member should pick and use it, and even for other jurisdictions, even for other parliaments. So I stand guided, Mr. Speaker, and support.
I think that if we just unless 1 minute, so that we don't, you know, I don't want us to debate this because you know there is also a lesson to be borrowed from Uganda. They can have a dean. Honorable Ochieng.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that was a detailed and authoritative direction that perhaps, as you say, we should rightly not comment too much on because we might need to read it. Sometimes when you listen and before you read, you might misread or misunderstand the directions. But, Mr. Speaker, I think it is authoritative to the extent that it balances three important things. The first thing it balances is the need for party discipline and the fact that the parties that get the majority should have a certain more advantage than others who don't. The second thing it balances is the truth that the idea of independent candidates and even candidates from smaller parties is recognized in our constitution. And the third thing it has to balance is the merit of having coalitions. Those are three difficult pillars to balance, and I think it has endeavored to do it well. Mr. Speaker, as I see it, there are two aspects of that direction. There's the short-term aspect and the long-term aspect. The short-term aspect, Mr. Speaker, is where the Committee on Selection must now go back to work. To the extent the direction is that the 14 independents are entitled to 36 slots, it then requires some mathematics and some balancing, including balloting and drawing lots. Now, that is short-term, and that can be done. But the long-term, Mr. Speaker, I think that's where we need to focus. They need to amend the standing orders, and perhaps that will answer some of the concerns that the minority and majority leaders are addressing. You know, do we need a dean of independence? I mean, do we have another, you know, the independents now electing their own leader and all that? But that's for the standing orders. Mr. Speaker, I think that the other thing that it leaves for now, and I suggest that the majority and minority leader should not let the cat out of the bag too much on this, is that while it accords enough rights to the independents and those from minority parties or non-parliamentary parties, we still have the discretion of choosing which committees to put those who are independents and from the smaller parties. Now, that is a conundrum that will fall at a certain stage. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you because while many might think that this is a ruling that only advantages independents and those from smaller parties, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, coming from the minority party, which is the second largest party, some of us have been suffering. It is not only Honorable Ochieng who is in one committee. Many of us, including me, have only been serving in one committee. Because some of those from smaller parties and independents know how to negotiate. They go to the majority, they come to the minority, they go to everyone, and they get 3 committees, very important committees, while those of us from the majority only get 1 committee. So I actually thank you that you have actually helped us a lot overall in this ruling. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I sit, I only wanted to seek your direction. Last week, you had also indicated you might give another direction on a point of order I raised. I don't know if you'll manage today or another day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I think, you know, that's the way of budget, and I think you know, it also has raised some constitutional issues. I'm sure you recall Honorable Ochieng. So please allow me to work through, because you know everybody has been too busy with the budget cycle.
Thank you.
I know the Honorable John Bandi has not been sleeping with the budget issues. But maybe that one I could give, I could do it in the course of next week.
Well guided, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Now, I can see I hope, Honorable Murugara, you have not been disadvantaged, but also let me say this. If 1 minute, but you'll speak. Let me also say this. Honorable Ochieng, you raised some pertinent issues, but remember, even as the leader majority talks about his belief in bigger parties, That's why the bigger parties have got leadership, they have whips, they have got offices specified for their leadership, because the other tiny ones have no capacity for those kind of things. We can't be able to facilitate all of them. So there's always some balance that, yes, you can choose to be small and then live in the... When we started this problem of COVID, you remember there's a group which was called Night Shift. And the Honorable Millie was an active member. And one day she commented that she was not in the chamber, she was in the ghettos. So maybe somebody might have to make a choice. Just as a matter of balancing. Honorable Getonga Murugara, but please let's take 1 minute each so that we can then go to business.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today we got to thank you because it had started and we were really having sleepless nights. But Kiswahili is saying that when you see your friend washing his head to get shaved, start washing yours also. And the Honorable Junet and Honorable Mbandi started it, while we had assurance from the majority leader that we were protected. The new majority whip started sending out letters, and we knew we from the small parties would actually be next. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, because you protected us. We are now assured that we can work for this House diligently without having to worry. Mr. Speaker, I have noted from your ruling that we have also to be represented in the select committee. Guide us even before we change the standing orders, how the small parties and the independents will actually have their representatives in the select committee. That way, we will also feel we were democratically elected, we have a role to play in this House, and we really have to serve the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
But you see, among the slots that cumulatively belong to the independents, if they want one of the slots to go to selection, it's still their choice, isn't it?
Mr. Speaker, now that I have the mic.
You make a decision. Who already has the mic? Okay, you speak because
Mr.
you already
Speaker,
have
now that I have the mic.
Is that the Honorable Ochieng?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I really want to thank you for a very thorough, learned, and considered ruling that will reverberate not just in this House, but I'm sure so many parliaments will learn from this, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you for saving my skin. You know, the majority and the minority have colluded generally, Mr. Speaker, as you can see. It depends on how you look at things, Mr. Speaker. Before I sit down, I just wanted to say, Mr. Speaker, that the way you run this country is in the Constitution. So even if the majority and minority are sitting in the Committee on Selection, Mr. Speaker, even giving those committee seats cannot go the way Honorable Mbadi suggests, that you'll be given some dry committees. They are not dry committees, they are not wet committees in this House. All the committees are committees of the House. Now, how you believe in the rule of law depends on how, when you are given a cake to give out in a dark room and you're alone, you go about it. It tells a lot about you. It tells a lot about what you believe in. You can't be here telling us that you believe in the rule of law, and when you are given a chance, then you want to do the worst thing that the worst people could do. Mr. Speaker, I thank you so much, and I look forward to reading your ruling again so that I can appreciate what it is. Thank you so much.
Majority whip.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I wish to say that your ruling is quite timely, especially at a time when Honorable Murungara is blaming the majority whip that is sending around letters, Honorable Speaker. All it's going is, Honorable Murungara, is that every person in the House, depending on whichever coalition you came in from, you have a leader. And Honorable Speaker, the way you have put it very clearly, looking at the Articles 176 and the way you've communicated to us, if it's corrected properly, in line with what the majority leader said, it's simply going to clean and not to disobey anyone, not disorganize anyone, but to shape up that the future of this August House, Honorable Speaker, is going to be a very organized place than the way it has been. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Mbwe.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I also want to say that I think the ruling was quite intelligent and well thought out. Because, Mr. Speaker, I see the intention for you to protect every member of this House so that they can participate in Article 95, where they have to be able to oversight. But, Mr. Speaker, I think in my opinion would be that somehow that also opens a Pandora's box. Because if the intention is for every member to be able to be in a committee to oversight, then if you belong to a political party and then you misbehave, we also know that the law allows the whips to be able to de-whip members. Now that means that members of political parties can be de-whipped, and therefore they will not be able to serve and do what you intend to do, yet those that are independent and those that are in smaller parties could continue for the 5 years. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't know how maybe you would like to deal with that going into the future. Otherwise, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Fortunately, a person is de-whipped for, there are the reasons. And, you know, you are elected on a political party, you must abide by its rules, understand what is party position at all times. And that's why you remember, Honorable Bui, we struggled towards the end of last term to include this at 176(1). Give the member an opportunity to be heard. Maybe they may have been doing some few things without knowing. Maybe when they appear before the Committee on Discipline, I could remind them of a famous Kanu Disciplinary Committee chaired by the late Okiki Amayo, where people would kneel by the when they get into the room. But you know, sometimes members are also reminded that you belong to this party, and you can see the people listen and give them a chance. They can see who are remorseful and who are jokers. Who are remorseful and they can be pardoned, isn't it? And the Constitution itself, if you look at the articles, Article 92, and the Political Parties Act, indeed, the party has got the right to discipline its members. In fact, in some jurisdictions that I know of, it is the political parties, the whips, who even inform the speaker of which member to be allowed to travel out of the country. So that to maintain party discipline and loyalty. I'm not suggesting anything right now, but I know of very highly developed democracies which have that kind of But I think these are things that even when they are proposed, because the issue of discipline is there. It is there even in all party constitutions. And if you look at the templates which are provided even in the Political Parties Act, under the first and second schedule, second and third schedule, those things are there. So it is not new. Gosh. Can we go to the Honorable Millie, because I have not heard the voice of a lady, you are the only one whose hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me just appreciate the ruling that you have given. I actually spoke to this the last time, and I indicated that it's a very tricky path that you have to travel in democracy. That on the one hand, we must strengthen our political parties, but on the other hand, we must also give members a chance to exercise their constitutional rights of representation, oversight, and legislation, which is predominantly done within committees. Mr. Speaker, you have actually spoken very well, and I'd want to say that it is also, this ruling is a challenge even to our bigger parties to exercise internal democracy, because that is how parties will grow. When bigger parties are able to exercise internal democracy, then you will not have spin-offs in terms of independent and smaller members, because half of these members were actually members of bigger parties. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that there are one or two things that even as we are looking at the issue of amending the standing orders that you didn't address that we need to look at. We are having coalitions, whether formed before or after. We have not talked about the intra-coalition issues that is likely to come up. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, one of the issues that I think maybe as we are amending, we need to look at is the issue of proportions. That as much as I support the issue of independence as a smaller groups, but it would be very unfair for bigger parties to work so hard and come with bigger parties and then they have total representation, in parties with the smaller parties. At least that's why I even said when I was speaking that it would be fine even if they had a quarter of a party, in a committee, which is not possible. So perhaps the best that they can have would be one. But then also the other issue would be that when we are doing the standing orders, is what role the bigger parties would have in terms of picking the committees. And if there is any other role in terms of agreements with any other parties and whether then they can de-whip them. So that let's assume Honorable Ochieng came in with his MDG party, and because maybe the only slot he has is in catering, he negotiates with ODM to go into health. If he then says he's not interested in ODM, then ODM should de-whip him. Because even though he's chosen that, but that would then be a slot for ODM. So I think there are so many intricacies that perhaps we still need to look at. And finally, Speaker, I want to be able to say that Honorable Ochieng also referred to the issue of encouraging bigger parties to practice rule of law even when they are signing. That, unfortunately, is the reality of life of democracy. You can't have your cake and eat it. If you are in a bigger party, you get benefits. If you are in a smaller party, you get some benefits, but which are equivalent to the smallness of your party. So if the bigger parties choose that they want to assign to you the catering committee, which is not bad, then you will be sure that we are taking good care of us. It's not bad. But if you want help, then you need to be in a bigger party. Thank you, Chair.
Well, honourable members, this thing is done mathematically to the letter. But of course, as we say, this is what should have been applied, but it wasn't at that time because it had not been provided for in the standing orders. Surely, don't we? Now, who is that on this side? That Dr. Makali Mulu. Please, say.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will be very brief. I want to start by really appreciating the communication. I think it has given very good direction in terms of how we move to the future. But, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to say, having listened to you very carefully, and more so the mathematical bit of it, I think as the committee works on the standing orders and the mathematics, there will be need to review the mathematics. I think the mathematics as a bit of a, because if proportionately you share the positions, it will be very difficult for a small party to get 2 slots when the major parties are getting 1.5 or 1. So if you work mathematically, I think automatically there will be a review of those figures. That's the only thing I wanted to say. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I say, like I said, thank you, Honorable Makali. But we'll have to do with arithmetic. So we cannot avoid that now, because it may be very difficult to do it otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for the ruling and the communication that you have made today. And with that ruling of yours, Mr. Speaker, I withdraw the letter that I have written to Honorable Ochieng this afternoon, officially, because of the ruling that you have made. But, Mr. Speaker, the selection committee will decide in which committee he will sit in the end. So they will after the meeting of the selection committee, they will communicate to him which committee officially belongs to MDG. Then they will go. But, Mr. Speaker, having said that, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to bring your attention that the ruling is really going to help in management of committees in this House. But, Mr. Speaker, you've said the independents here are 14 in number. But, Mr. Speaker, I know you are looking at independents who are all over the world in mature democracy. The kind of independence, Mr. Speaker, you are looking for are not in this House, Mr. Speaker. I have cases, Mr. Speaker, of independents
who advance agenda of minority or majority party more than the membership of that House, Mr. Speaker. He's in the forefront that you'll think he's the owner of ODM or he's the owner of Jubilee, Mr. Speaker. And he's independent, Mr. Speaker. They are here. One was collecting today signatures of a minister to be impeached, one of the independents, Mr. Speaker. And he knows he has only 14 members. He can't raise the number. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't know who will de-whip these independents when they misbehave, Mr. Speaker, because they don't have leadership in the House, they don't have a whip, they don't have a deputy whip, Mr. Speaker. These are independents who are just mercenaries for hire, Mr. Speaker. These people should not be given any opportunity to decide which committee they should sit on, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, even the people who have come with their own parties, other than Ochieng, who is still jilted because of the elections in Uganda, and he will come to terms with it. Very soon you will see him attending ODM meetings. Give him another 2 months, Mr. Speaker. He is still suffering from the war in Uganda. Once that subsides, Mr. Speaker, you will see him, when we call for ODM elections, you will see Ochieng saying he wants to be the Secretary General. Give him time, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, even the ones who are from small parties, like Mheshimiwa Murugara here, when you meet Murugara, you will not know he's from a small party. You will think he's from Jubilee. Even me all along, I knew he's a Jubilee member. It's only today that I've heard that he's from a small party, Mr. Speaker. These small people should not lie to you that they belong to small parties, Mr. Speaker. They were just looking for vehicles to come to this house, Mr. Speaker. And when they have arrived here, they know who their father is, Mr. Speaker, and who their mother is. Some of them know their father is Jubilee. The other one know his father is ODM, Mr. Speaker. They were just born from different women, Mr. Speaker, and wives, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, don't create a small... Let me leave it there, Mr. Speaker. I'll talk to you.
Now, I must hear the member for North Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for your landmark ruling. This ruling will really guide future parliaments. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are guided by our constitution. Standing orders, as good as they may be, in enabling us to conduct business of this House, they are not superior to the Constitution. Your ruling was well anchored in the spirit and letter of our Constitution, and for that I really want to appreciate. Mr. Speaker, sir, I take an offense when my colleague and an edgemate in this parliament, because we came to this parliament together in the 10th parliament, Honorable John Bundy, calling our small parties briefcase parties. So, Speaker, sir, some of us, I was actually a member of ODM for 10 years. I was able to leave ODM and get elected on a party of my choice wherever in other constituency. Mr. Speaker, sir, unlike him, if he dares to leave ODM, he'll not even be a chairman of a kettle dip in Suba, or in where he comes from. Mr. Speaker, sir, it's Kenyans who decide how we get to this House. So, Speaker, sir, you should respect small parties. They are part and architecture of our Constitution, on our political arrangements in this country, equal independence. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are ranking members of this House, serving third term, and I'm not the only one. There are also other members who are senior members who are from small parties. I beg, as the leader of this House, to respect small parties. I thank you.
Member for Nyando, I've seen your hand up for so long.
Mr. Speaker.
I hope now you are not going to talk about papers.
Mr. Speaker, only you and I understand what we are talking about. Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much for the detailed ruling. Lately, courtesy of the lockdown, I've been reading a lot of judgments from our superior courts, from High Court to Court of Appeal on the same matter, all the way to the Supreme Court. And Mr. Speaker, you listen or read the arguments advanced by various judges in a matter, and they're all very convincing. If somebody would put your judgment today on a contrary opinion and is asked to write a different opinion, Mr. Speaker, they will as well be very convincing. I remember the president of this country last weekend caught in a very tight situation of unlocking or continuing to lock the country. And he said it was not a matter of what is right and what is wrong, but both which are right.
And I think, Mr. Speaker, you have tried to juggle between those two fundamentals. Mr. Speaker, we are fortunate that you come from a history of developing a very serious political movement. When you were in KANU, as a very senior member, KANU members was strewn all over this house until you left. And therefore, you understand how difficult it is to put beef into a political movement, and particularly a political party. And Mr. Speaker, it is a travesty that people would put a lot of their time and resources developing political parties in order to come here and enjoy the benefits. Some of my colleagues in this house, with due respect to them, have what we call fringe parties. They have briefcase parties. One person representing a political party in this house, yet the Constitution is very clear on what must be met for one to register a political party with the Register of Political Parties. And you wonder, where did all these offices, evaporate to? My brother here, Honorable Junaid, calls them NGOs. But Mr. Speaker, of fundamental concern to me is that when committees are being constituted in this house, and you have representation from independents and those with fringe political parties, it behoves both the majority and minority parties to give them slots. And your ruling, Mr. Speaker, is an eye-opener, that no majority party, no minority party will ever take a risk to give them any position. Because, one, they look down upon the parties who have been very charitable to them. They never listen to us. Mr. Speaker, I'm a very senior party member of ODM, and in fact, I sit in the National Executive Committee. And these people that we donate very, very generously so to positions in this house, firstly, they never understand our manifesto. We don't even understand their manifesto. Of course, we are not interested in knowing manifestos of fringe parties. But there must be a point where discipline must be instituted. And Mr. Speaker, as we will retreat as a house to look at in depth on how these positions will be shared going forward, let us put a lot of emphasis on bigger parties benefiting the more and fringe parties being pushed to the back burner so that they can understand that it is important to go across this country to market your party so that you can also bring the numbers here for negotiation. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me, the Constitution that talks about political parties talks about national representation. And if a party is boxed into a small constituency in Uganda, Mr. Speaker, it does not serve the national representation. And therefore, let us also encourage parties to market and to have people and to propagate nationalism as opposed to individualism in Uganda. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, of course, that is obviously the domain of the Register of Political Parties. If they look at the requirements of Article 91 of the Constitution, they will see what are described as the most salient attributes of a political party. So, when they are liberty to, I don't know how to get into that argument, but of course the mathematics also favors the bigger parties, isn't it? One side has got, out of the 622 slots available, one side has got 330, the other side has got 226. So you it is done. You can take your computer. Remember, John Bandi, I know this is your area. I know this is your area. You do well to give us any variation because it's down to the nearest decimal point. Is it possible, no members, that we can? What can we? Go to
I thank you, Speaker. Speaker, thank you for allowing me to add my voice to this. Speaker, your ruling is coming at a time when I see two challenges. It's a very good ruling, very detailed ruling, balancing rights in terms of parliamentary action and representation. Mr. Speaker, may I beg the top leadership?
There's something called social distancing. These three, the member for Homa Bay County, the member for Likoni, member for Mvita, you are not social distancing.
Yeah, they're in deeper consultations. Speaker, I see two challenges. One is that we are in a situation where the members of parliament who are in either smaller parties or independents negotiated their positions in the committees through the majority and minority initially. Speaker, I don't know how that would be dealt with now that you embargo the majority and minority committees from going back. Because, Mr. Speaker, I sit in a committee like Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and I'm only knowing today that Honorable Murugara is not a member of Jubilee. I'm only knowing today. And I know he got his position in Justice and Legal Affairs and Committee on Delegated Legislation through Jubilee. And of course, several other positions also this side. Maybe do we take solace in the fact that this can be reorganized? But more fundamentally, Mr. Speaker, now that Honorable Junet confirms, and we all agree, that your ruling looks at Kenya in a mature democratic state. And in truth, we are still a growing democracy, very nascent. We are in a democracy where, as Honorable Junet rightly says, an independent member of parliament is more ODM if he comes from Nyanza than Kaluma, who is ODM. Like Peter Masara, I can tell you he can kill for ODM in Nyanza, yet in the house here, he's an independent. And by the way, I also know Honorable Peter Masara is in the Committee on Administration and National Security through ODM. It's a slot there. Now, are we going to say, Mr. Speaker, that there are some committees which, by their nature, are independent, knowing we don't have pure independence? As Speaker, remember in the US, there is somebody who was said to be so independent, even his wife never knew how he would vote on an issue. Just in parliament, as the time also he was, in the court system there. Nobody knew how he would decide. But in Kenya, the reality is that we don't have a pure independent. In Kenya, the reality is that as people really are already confirming, by the time we are approaching elections, based on the regions we come from, people like Honorable Ochieng will have to affiliate to ODM, either directly or through the party leader. And Mr. Speaker, you know what they do even during campaigns? That you will get the photo of the party leader of a party with an independent, and then they are campaigning, throughout, and they win, taking advantage of the facilities and personalities of the party. Speaker, that is a matter to be thought through. But what is worrying me? That, Mr. Speaker, there are committees which by their nature, in my view, and I'm to the rules and procedure, there are committees which an independent cannot sit on. Adding to the fact, in my view, Mr. Speaker, that we are not pure independents. Look at an oversight committee. I'm talking largely of oversight committees and the formations which are required. And with our nascent democracy, you'll have the majority party, for instance, having many independents in a committee like PAC, so that the minority party is deluded. You have your numbers there, but really you have independents which put together with the majority will actually subdue the proper oversight. I think when the Rules Committee looks into this, Oversight Committee should be out of it. Even some departmental committees are too key for an independent. I think this may be defined. I see largely independents and people in small committees going into, select committees like CDF, or if they are departmental, maybe sports, but really those core functional things where you want parliament to engage through minority, majority, or opposition and government, I don't think we would be furthering parliamentary democracy if we approach it that way.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Let that be the last, please. And
Thank you,
take
Honorable
1
Speaker.
minute so that we can go to business.
Honorable Speaker, you have made a ruling that has subsided the one from Arende. You will go to history of this country that you have given the election to this parliament. Honorable Speaker, I think we are here to serve the people that elected us. And we are privileged to be here for the reason that we decided to go to political parties to be a ticket so that we can come here. We respect the political parties act, but Honorable Speaker, there's a place whereby you cannot remove a privilege from a member to represent these people in a committee where you generate agendas for the people. Honorable Speaker, my whip is here. I have performed very well in my committee. Even my chairman went and pleaded with my whip. And the reason that I was de-whipped from the committee is just because I am a friend to William Ruto. Honorable Speaker, you cannot dictate to me to choose friends. Honorable Ruto was my friend even before I became a politician. You know I'm a clergyman, and I met Ruto when I was in the ministry. Honorable Speaker, it's a very big shame. Turkana is a place whereby you have to struggle to sell ODM in order to come here. It's a shame for me not to present my people in the committee that I was deliberating the issues concerning Turkana people. So as you work on changing standing orders, Honorable Speaker, please remove the party from committees so that you are selected because you are a professional or because you are representing your people. Why am I saying so, Honorable Speaker? I'm saying because I have not done anything in this party. I was jailed in Turkana, 4 days house arrest because of ODM. I told people don't go to put election. I went to the hospital 3 days because I held tear gas because of accompanying my political leader, Raila Odinga. Honorable Speaker, it's very shameful that a whip can remove me because I am a friend to Ruto. It's not good. So, Honorable Speaker, I am a member of ODM. I am a member of ODM. I still am a member of ODM, but Ruto is my friend. Simple as that. Thank you.
Well, very well, honourable members. I think it's just good to affirm one point, that the constitution we have has allowed Kenyans wide choices. That's why there is a specific article, Article 85. Indeed, Article 85 and 99. They recognize, first of all, 85 recognizes the right for a person to run as an independent. And in the qualification, if you go to Article 99 on the qualification to be a member of parliament, it recognizes that right of independence. But Article 91 talks about political parties. So once you are a member of a political party, surely you must abide by the rules of that party. The essence, and that's why I said, and I hope many of you could not remember, but I've just noticed many of you could not remember that we sat here the whole day when adopting these new standing orders. And we introduced subsection 1 in Standing Order 176 to provide for yes, because we really must make a choice. You either be independent or join a political party. But we said yes, and the political parties the world over, it is not unique to Kenya. It is not unique to Kenya about party discipline. Why do you think the whip exists? The whip exists to enforce party discipline within Parliament.
to ensure members know this is what this is the position of the party on this matter, and then also take note that this member, every time I tell them this is the party position, the member ducks the toilets, a member walks away, says he is having mandazi, he is having tea, doesn't come. So the whip takes notes. And that is why, if you recall, Honorable Odebe, in the last parliament, we said we will not get involved ourselves with matters outside parliament. But remember, your party is not just in parliament. So if they could be having the eye of God following you whichever hideout you may be. So that one I will not be there myself. But here we must recognize that the country adopted a constitution that allows you to run as an independent, allows you to join any political party. That's your right, actually, under Article 38. Yeah? That cannot be taken, again, that right cannot be taken away from you. Even if you wanted to move, one of the ways you would lose, an independent would lose their seat. Look at Article 103. Is while here, well, of course, what Honorable Kaluma said is not, we all know. But of course, if you have been brought here by your people as an independent, if you openly join a political party, that's one of the grounds for which I could easily declare your seat vacant. And you go and try your luck with whichever other formation you may have chosen. You see? So, I mean, these are the things that we must balance at all times. You have your party, please belong to it. And do what it calls upon you to do while here. So the rest, Honorable Odebe, don't worry. Tear gas, why do you think there's tear gas in the country? It's to deal with those situations which become, it is not an accident. It is, we sympathize, nevertheless, Honorable Odebe. I know you are a man, you are a church man, and you are a bishop. We sympathize that you want to take in a bit of it. But I'm sure many members here have dealt with those situations several in the past. And many of them, like the member for Homabi, may have started when she was a student. So she may have got the news. If you started in old age now, you may be in trouble. It's unfortunate, Honorable Odebe. We sympathize with that situation. Honorable members, I think let's go to the next order so that we can do business. But nevertheless, thank you for the comments.
Order number 8, motion, report on the budget estimates for the financial year 2020-2021, general debate, second allotted day.
On the floor. Okay, there's nobody who was on the floor. The Honorable Kaluma had just spoken, so I go to the board. Member for Nakuru Town East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to be able to give my input to this very critical motion this afternoon, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, first I would want to appreciate the committee, the members of my committee, and the cooperation that they gave during the budget-making process. Honorable Speaker, despite the very, very difficult situations, we were able to go through. But also, Speaker, I think it is most important, much as we have this kind of a situation, it is important to be given, the sitting in a committee. It became but all the same, we were able to complete the exercise on time, Honorable Speaker, and we were able to do a few adjustments. Honorable Speaker, the budget under the two ministries, basically, much as is underfunded. Honorable Speaker, if you look at the allocations that have been given to these two very, very important sector, that is the energy and petroleum, the budgets have been declining over the years. We started with a high of almost 120 billion some 3-4 years ago, but now it is a parity only around 70 billion shillings. And Honourable Speaker, looking at the government programs and energy being an enabler to the Big Four, I think it is part of what we expected, that would be given more money as stipulated and as we had indicated before the budget. But of course, we understand we have limited resources, and so we, as a committee, we had to prioritize only to the ongoing. And Honourable Speaker, as a committee, we have also made it very clear to the respective ministries that we will no longer be accepting new programs if we have so many other programs that are ongoing and yet they don't have any budget allocation in any financial year. Honourable Speaker, it is very sad to have over 20 transmission lines at almost 80-90% that do not have an allocation, and yet they are at 80-90% completion, yet we are thinking of starting some other new programs taking billions. And we have said that as a committee, we have stopped some of these new programs which were being brought so that we can be able to complete. And the completion, Honourable Speaker, and this is something that some of these ministries, and we'll be asking a proper audit to be done in some of these things. You find that a program that is almost 90% complete and is not given allocation, after 1 year or two, the vandalism that has gone along that direction then calls for, again, funding when we restart that program almost to 50%, yet we required only 10%. So as a committee, we have put our foot on the ground, and we have told the two respective ministries and our oversight is that we will no longer be doing that. Honourable Speaker, the continued delay in transmission and completion on some of this transmission calls for unnecessary charges to this government. Honourable Speaker, at one point where we had to pay quite a huge amount of money in idle power because we were not, the people who had been given some station had already completed. So as a committee, Honourable Speaker, much as we have been fighting to have low-cost power, and we have always tried to indicate that this budget should go towards projects, particularly renewable energy, which has very low costs at almost 70 cents dollar per kilowatt hour. But unfortunately, Honourable Speaker, we have, and this is another area that we'll be looking into in this coming financial year, where we have independent power producers who have signed agreements which are so punitive to our economy, to an extent that these ministries enter into some agreements with the independent power producers, to a point that, knowing very well our consumption as it is for electricity, which is less than 2,000 megawatts, but they continue allowing agreements to be signed year in, year out, all the time. And yet Kenya, KPLC, when they sign this agreement, the ailing KPLC now is forced to buy power that they cannot be able to sell. So again, this is an area that we really needed to check, Honourable Speaker. This budget did give us an opportunity for us even to try and resurrect KPLC. Honourable Speaker, the energy sector, the backbone of energy sector is the Kenya Power. And if Kenya Power is ailing, then it's going to affect almost the whole entire energy sector, because they are supposed to buy electricity from KenGen, where they have to pay. KenGen has to pay GDC because they're the ones who drilled the wells. At the same time, KPLC has to pay the whaling charges to Ketraco to continue keeping our lines safe. And lastly, they also have to pay REREC under the electricity levy. So again, it is important for the budget committee, and this one we had actually requested the budget committee to look into some amount owing to KPLC, almost 11.9 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker, which is owed by the government to KPLC so that they could be able to start paying some of their pending bills, which are so critical, besides the negotiation that KPLC is undergoing to try and widen their repayment periods with the finances. Honorable Speaker, at the same time also the industry itself does not, and this is also part of committee under the same budget when we are looking at it, is that EPRA, which is the regulatory body that is supposed to give tariffs. Honorable Speaker, EPRA also plays part, and we have also made it very clear that as they make these tariffs must also be subjected to the committee at some point, much as they're independent in making their decision. Honorable Speaker, it is unfair for them to push the lifeline. Of course, we want to assist Kenyans to pay low cost in terms of electricity, but also we should do that with having in mind the bearer of the cost. So if when we increase the lifeline to the consumers from 0 to 10 and we pushed it to 0 to 100, Honorable Speaker, that took almost 90% of KPLC customers to lifeline, to a point that KPLC can no longer be able to sustain itself. So it is something that we need to relook into and to assist, Honorable Speaker, the accounting officers within the respective ministry. They might think they are not very important people, but Honorable Speaker, if they are not checked, and this is where I think we also need to look into deeply, is that the accounting officers need to rein on some of these government departments and agencies to try and stop accumulation of pending bills. Honorable Speaker, Kenyans have worked, they have spent their money, gone to banks to collect money, and yet we allow so much and so huge pending bills accumulated, yet we have, within each saga, they have internal auditors who can be able to assist. At the same time, the ministry does get some allocation for monitoring and evaluation. Yet, these things are happening. One of the institutions, the National Oil Corporation, which is on its knees. Honorable Speaker, we could not believe, because sometimes as a committee, we depend more so on the information given from the ministry and the agency itself. But unfortunately, Honorable Speaker, to some point where the finance manager or the finance general manager in an institution last year gave us and told us this institution has made 1.2 billion in terms of profit, only for him to come the other day with a new MD and tell us again the same institution under the same financial year had made a loss of 400 million. Honorable Speaker, then this person then there is a problem within the ministry where the evaluation and monitoring departments within the departments are not working to a point that we get cooked figures. And as you had said, Honorable Speaker, as committees, we cannot be like auditors. We can't just walk to an institution and start asking for papers. We believe in what...
Yeah, honourable members, I hope you recall the resolution we passed first on 28th of February, then on 2nd of June, so that every other member speaking will have 5 minutes. But we said we resolved that we will not limit the debate. Honourable Odm Mps.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say at the onset that I do support the committee's report. And Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that I'm happy that first, when the first estimate was brought, Mr. Speaker, that we were concerned as a committee, I sit in the budget committee, that it was not COVID-friendly because it was more of budget as usual, because it was not taking into account measures that are needed to address the issues that the country is facing. But I'm glad this is actually now trying to do so. Mr. Speaker, very quickly, because I know I don't have time, I think some of the issues that I've raised in the committee, which I think need to go on record, is that increasingly the budget must show equality and equity in the country. If you look, for instance, at the way there's disbursement of infrastructure, because of time I cannot mention, but we are not seeing the face of Kenya even in disbursement. Mr. Speaker, in the same manner, if you look at blue economy, which is good that is looking at the issue of the Big Four agenda, but also dealing with the issue of COVID response, especially food security. But again, if you look at the traditional fisheries areas, there is not much emphasis and input that is put in that. And I would want to encourage the peers for fisheries, who is my friend but is not behaving well in this regard, that he needs to know that even as we are expanding fishing, it doesn't mean we kill the traditional fishing areas. So we want to see more of the resources relating to blue economy going back to the traditional fishing communities as well. Mr. Speaker, I would also want to say that members have spoken to the issue of the need for clearing bills, and our committee has given recommendations. And Mr. Speaker, I think the executive should take this more seriously. Mr. Speaker, we had also suggested that the stimulus, a lot of the stimulus responses to COVID should use, especially the ones that are aligned to CDF, should use the constituencies as a focal point. Because if you actually look at the stimulus package that was done in the Kibaki era, some of them are being spoken about up to this moment. Some people sometimes wonder why the current MPs are not doing as much work. They don't realize that some of the work that was done then was done because of the stimulus package that was done by Honorable Mwai Kibaki and Raila Amolo Odinga. So I would want to encourage that in the same manner, if you actually want to ensure effective results, we should use that as a unit. Mr. Speaker, the other issue that has been raised here is the issue of allocations to public participation. And one of the things I happen to know as a committee, a member of the budget committee, is that when you are talking about public participation, and especially because of COVID, the public there was an advert by Parliament, and the public was supposed to give or rather respond. And many of the areas people did not respond, Mr. Speaker. And so as a committee, we are then constrained in terms of work that we can do. And even in some areas, if the public actually asks for a class, you cannot then give them a factory. Because then in terms of public participation, the committee was constrained and they could only do what the public requested. And finally, Mr. Speaker, because I can see my time is up, I'd want to say that one honorable member from Nyandarua was talking about the need for expanding rural electrification, especially because of our children who cannot study online. But I want to say that I would want to encourage the Ministry of Education to look at community-based approaches to education, especially in rural areas where there is no electricity, where they can't go online. Perhaps we need to have village caucuses for children with retired teachers, with the teachers, volunteer teachers who are not employed, and that has not been budgeted for. That is one of the areas that we should actually have looked into, because that's the reality, that it might take us up to September or beyond when our children are sitting. And even though we don't want to look at a supplementary, maybe that's something that should come up in the next in the supplementary one, if at all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to start on the very onset by thanking my Committee of Environment and Natural Resource for putting in long hours, despite the current prevailing situation of COVID-19, to come up with various recommendations on the budget estimate. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to thank Budget and Appropriation Committee for being extremely very accommodative when we are presenting our report. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, sir, when we are doing the scrutiny of this budget, we came through various challenges, Mr. Speaker, bearing in mind that on 29 April, the estimate which were tabled in this House continued mutating as we progressed scrutinizing the budget. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that as I was presenting the committee's report in the Budget Appropriation Committee, we were shocked to hear that there were further cuts in the printed estimate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when we were able to adjust within our basket, Mr. Speaker, we also understood that the National Treasury was also not very comfortable with the recommendations which were done by the Departmental Committee, and hence we were forced, Mr. Speaker, to revise. Mr. Speaker, going specifically to the various MDAs, and starting with the Department of Wildlife, which had a projection of appropriation in aid of 4.6 billion expected to be achieved through the PAC piece by KWS. However, Mr. Speaker, due to the COVID situation, bearing in mind that KWS and its A&A through the PAC piece, it may not really be tenable to be able to achieve this. Mr. Speaker, the shortfall will really affect KWS operations. These are monies which are expected for personnel enumerate, as well as operation and maintenance activities, as well as the issues of human-wildlife conflict. Mr. Speaker, arising from the above, where KWS may not realize the projected its A&A collection, there is likelihood of a shortfall of 3.68 billion. It is therefore, Mr. Speaker, very critical that the National Treasury provide KWS to cater for this shortfall. Mr. Speaker, we have a State Department of Mining, which has very big potential, more than 500 billion in terms of A&A in a financial year. But, Mr. Speaker, despite the underfunding on the State Department of Mining, the department could only be able to contribute only 1.6 billion in our economy. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that Honorable Mashako has come up with even seeking statement, because we realize quite a number of people who have been given licenses to explore our natural resources are actually not doing so. Whatever they're able to disclose to the ministry, it is not satisfactory, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sometimes it sounds very ironical. When you look at an entire State Department having a development vote of only 300 million, you really wonder, is it really worth it becoming a State Department or not? Bearing in mind, it started as a standalone Ministry of Mining. Later on, it was downgraded into a State Department. But, Mr. Speaker, the State Department of Mining is actually grossly underfunded. Mr. Speaker, nevertheless, the State Department has very big potential, and we are really calling upon them to be able to seal up any regulatory gaps which may be there, which have been denying the State Department A&A collection due to under-declaration by the mining companies. Mr. Speaker, sir, when we come to the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, we had a presidential directive of achieving 10% recovery by 2022. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is also equally ironical that the National Treasury under 2020-2021 financial year, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry has been allocated only 240 million Kenya shillings, whereas it had a projection of 5 billion Kenya shillings. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, sometimes the government is just doing public relations because it is not able to walk the talk, because sometimes it does not really make any sense when there's a presidential. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sometimes it does not really make sense out of a presidential directive which is not really also be able to forward by the National Treasury. Mr. Speaker, we are in this current era of COVID-19. And as we are seated here, we can be able to see, Mr. Speaker, we are all a mask. And, Mr. Speaker, we have a lot of biomedical waste from face masks and other PPEs across the country, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, therefore, NEMA requested for approximately 470 million to come up with incinerators across the entire country. But, Mr. Speaker, the same has not been provided. We sought support from the Budget and Appropriation Committee to ensure that we come up with measures on how to be able to address the biomedical waste, which is emanating out of the COVID-19 PPEs, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, coming to the, likewise, under NEMA, Mr. Speaker, we all realize that we are requesting that the NEMA environmental impact assessment fees to really be reinstated, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since the time when the government withdrew the ENA, Mr. Speaker, for NEMA, NEMA has never stood on its own feet again, because it has been relying on national treasury, exchequer, and Mr. Speaker, what we are really calling for, and we have the support of the parent ministry, it is for the national treasury to reinstate ENA, which NEMA used to collect, so that it can really be able to be independent and be able to undertake its mandate effectively. Mr. Speaker, sir, coming to the State Department, to the Minister of Water and Sanitation, I really want to thank the National Treasury because it has gone out of its way to be able to give reasonable funding irrespective of the current situation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we realize we have quite a number of programs which are low-hanging fruits, especially in our backyard, the water harvesting, the National Water Harvesting and Storage Program. We have the cross-county water programs, as well as the National Expanded Irrigation Program, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under this Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation, I really want to thank the National Treasury because it has given an extra 2.6 billion to expand irrigation in the country, Mr. Speaker. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, we have noted that the same have been captured under community program, Mr. Speaker, and we have received a correspondence from the Minister of Water and Sanitation requesting that the same should be reallocated to be under National Expanded Irrigation Program, Mr. Speaker. And then, Mr. Speaker, we shall be requesting for an amendment so that we can really be able to align the request of the ministry when it comes to the Committee of Supply, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, without much further ado, Mr. Speaker, I really want to take this opportunity to thank Budget and Appropriation Committee and especially its outgoing chairman, Mheshimiwa Kimani Ichung'wah, who has really gone out of his way to ensure that there is sanity in the sector, and many members can really be able to attest the great work which have been doing within the sector. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support.
Member for Funyula. And you, maybe Honorable Udo, you could come and speak from here. It looks like there's a problem with that mic.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I hope my minutes have not been lost.
They have not.
From where I was to here.
They start now.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. We are making a budget within an unprecedented environment that has been thrust to us by factors beyond our control. Indeed, we didn't generate corona. Corona visited us, and now when the visitor is in the house, however a menace he is or she is, you have to learn to live with him or her until you find ways and means of kicking that nuisance visitor from our homesteads. Honorable Speaker, unlike last financial year, there are so many uncertainties. Of course, many of us are worried that the proposals being presented are unlikely to be achieved. And that means there's going to be massive disorganization of activities and livelihoods in the country as we continuously adjust to the new reality in the way of supplementary budgets, cuts here and there, directed to some other places. Honorable Speaker, let me also take this opportunity to thank the Budget and Appropriation Committee for the wonderful job they have done. Of course, there are issues of concern, and I'd expected they will address these issues, but nevertheless, it's good to point them out. Number one, Honorable Speaker, because of the pandemic and other factors, we seem to have directed a substantial part of our resources towards consumption as opposed to production. Many of us know if you don't produce, you don't expand wealth, you don't expand the economy. But nevertheless, we hope in the subsequent years, once we have managed the pandemic, we would need to start shifting towards more production. The President has continuously talked of the Big Four agenda, and this is now becoming a tired song, because unless you fund adequately, it's just going to be a song that's better sung probably in a church choir. It is inappropriate to commit all the funds in other sectors and forget to put funds in enablers to allow improvement of manufacturing, to allow development of housing, which are labor-intensive and which generate employment and generate income. Honorable Speaker, going forward, as a country, as a parliament, says to the duty to make budget, we must continuously interrogate the allocation of resources. Honorable Speaker, I totally agree with the comments by Parliamentary Budget Office that with the reduction of VAT, reduction of other tax measures that we passed sometimes early this year, the revenue expected might not be achieved. The fear outside there that the government again is going to resort to heavy borrowing, which is going to be detrimental to the local economy. We just hope the mandarins at the Treasury will now start to seriously sit down and think critically how to resolve the issue. Honorable Speaker, there has been a continued concern, and this concern is manifested in the budget that we have passed, of skewed allocation of resources, skewed allocation of development in some areas at the expense of other areas. Honorable Speaker, all over the country, you see quite a number of roads projects, but in many parts of this part of our world, especially Busia, nobody bothers. Yet, there is so much resources. The Constitution dictates that we must have equitable share of resources in this country. We want to call upon Treasury and all ministries, whenever they make budget proposals, they must ensure there is a fair distribution of resources. All Kenyans pay taxes. It is unfair to put all the resources in one region, in one county, yet disfranchise other counties, yet we pay taxes, we vote, we participate in other activities, but when it comes to allocation of resources, there is simply nothing much. Honorable Speaker, the congestion in Busia town of the trucks, the congestion in Malaba town of the trucks is self-made by the national government. We have other border crossing points, and sometimes in 2009, when President Mwai Kibaki visited Busia County, he made a promise to open the Luanda border point, crossing point. The Ugandans have done their bit. They have built the road up to the river, yet our side, nobody seems to care. Now we are paying heavily for the congestion. Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, health. Busia, we have a crisis. We have a serious crisis. And we would want the Ministry of Health to really intervene. A tally of about now 300 COVID cases, imported COVID cases, with the interaction they're having with the people, the moment it hits the ground, the moment it goes to our community, Honorable Speaker, with a county that has got no ICU bed, with a county that has got no isolation beds, we are looking at a disaster. I would wish to request the department to seriously relook and give Busia County enough resources to manage this pandemic, because it's not our own making, it has been thrust to us by the national government. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support. Thank you.
Honorable Nyamai.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I arise to support. Honorable Speaker, let me take this opportunity, first of all, to thank the Parliamentary Committee on Lands for the support that they have, and also for taking time to ensure that they participate in the budget-making process from the BPS up to the estimates. Honorable Speaker, I would like to say